to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We humbly seek blessings upon strength, courage, and will to perform our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best.
Thank you. Please be seated. Assistant City Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Mahan, O'Neill,
Here.
Watanabe, Davis, Kolstadt,
Here.
and Mayor Gilmore.
Here.
And may I read the AB 23 announcement, Statement of Behavioral Standards?
Yes, please.
Members of the Santa Clara Stadium Authority, Sports and Open Space Authority, and Housing Authority are entitled to receive $30 for each attended meeting. The City of Santa Clara has adopted a code of ethics and values and behavioral standards for public meetings to promote and maintain the highest levels of conduct. This includes mutual respect, robust discussion, and allowing city business to be done in an efficient and consistent manner. Please note that as the presiding officer, the mayor's direction in matters of process and decorum should be followed, and that use of the gavel indicates all conversations must conclude and everyone in attendance should come to order and attention. Welcome and thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much.
Move to excuse Councilmember Davis.
Second. Motion second to excuse Councilmember Davis. Please register your vote. We have everyone registering. Sorry, we have a few technical issues occasionally.
Yeah, I vote yes, but it's not, sorry, my thing's not coming up.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, our next item is reports of action taken in closed session. City Attorney, do we have any? Report out?
There was no reportable action in closed session.
All right, thank you. Next is continuances and exceptions. Do we have any member of the council or staff that would like to continue any item? No member of the council? Any member of the public asking for continuance on any item? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move into our special order of business. And the first special order of business we have is recognition of outgoing Commissioner, former Board of Library Trustee member Ashish Mangla. And I see him here in the audience today. I'd like to ask Hillary Keith, our city librarian, if she'd like to come forward and tell us a little bit about Ashish. Thank you, Hillary.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, City Manager. It's bittersweet. It was really sad to see Ashish.
Maybe we can have him come forward,
Oh,
so
yeah,
when you're talking about him, everybody can see him. Thank you.
And if I could please have our board members that are present come forward as well.
You may want to introduce them, whoever's here.
Dan Hingemeiser, please come up.
Come
and
forward.
Stephen Ricosa.
Please come forward. It's one of the hardest working commissions here in the city.
So this is a heartfelt goodbye, but not really goodbye, but we hope to see you often and visit us. Ashish has been with the board for 8 years. He's been when I've been here for 4, and we've gone through Northside, the Bookmobile, the Pride Month. We went through, and now the Mission Library. So he's been with us every step of the way and guiding us through any pitfalls we might come across. So your dedication and your advocacy for public libraries is truly inspirational. So if you'd like to come forward.
You'd like to say a few words, please? Ashish, come forward. You may want to introduce, I think, do you have your family here too?
Yeah.
Okay.
My wife, Manisha, my son, elder son, Abhishek, my junior son, Aryan, and my girl, Avni. They are here too to see me. Um, it has been a great privilege and honor for me and my family to be part of this volunteer work which we did for more than 8 years now. And I know my wife has also helped me in all this. So I especially thank her for helping me for such a long time through this. And we'll continue doing volunteering in some capacity or another. I love libraries, and last I attended was Art and Wine Festival, and we helped there too. So I know my new roster members, which I have been with for now a couple of years, will take over this and do better than us what we have been doing in our rosters for last 8.5 years. So I know that it's in safe hands, our library and our board. Thank you.
Thank you. Give you a round of applause.
I think Jan Hintermeister would like to say a few words.
Thank you.
I just really wanted to thank Ashish. When I joined the board a couple of years ago, there had been a lot of turnover, and Ashish was the one man left standing with four new trustees. And although we get a thick binder from the clerk, I mean, really often the way you learn about being on commissions is by watching the previous commissioners. And at least that's what I did. I'm not sure about everybody else. But we had a great mentor and guide in Ashish. And I just really wanted to express my appreciation for everything he did and kind of showing us the way and kind of introducing us to how to behave properly and do business on a commission. So thanks, Ashish.
Thank you, Jan. And I believe Vice Mayor Watanabe would like to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I had the pleasure of serving with Ashish on the Library Board of Trustees for, I think, 4 of those years. And it indeed was a pleasure. I know how Ashish's heart was, dedicated, to the board, and also always looking for ways, to make the role of the trustee better and engaging. So I appreciate that. I'm sure you've left, a nice path for the current trustees to continue to follow, and thank you for your service, and we look forward to continuing to see you here in the city in another capacity. So thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, Ashish. If you'd like to come forward with Hillary and the board members and the council, if we could meet down there for a photo, we have a award for you. One, two. So for our next special order of business, we have an informational report on alert and warning systems in the city of Santa Clara. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Gilmore and members of the council. For the record, I'm Lisa Schoenthal, the city's Emergency Services Coordinator. Alert and warning systems in general have been highly visible topics since the North Bay fires of last fall. And even this week, there was a planned nationwide test of a federal alert and warning system. That test has been postponed. But this topic is very, very timely. So in our county, the Santa Clara County Office of Emergency Services provides the Everbridge platform to all of the jurisdictions within the county, and there are two major components to that platform for our purposes. The first that I'll talk about in greater detail in a moment is the Federal Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, also known as IPAWS. That has the emergency alert system and the wireless emergency alerts. So these are all federal alert and warning components of alert and warning. Alert SCC is the county alert and warning system that we use solely within Santa Clara County. The wireless emergency alert has been in the news this week in particular. This is an alert that does not require pre-registration. Cell phone carriers do have the option of opting out of that alert, although I don't recommend it, especially in California. This is for immediate threats to life safety. The best example of a wireless emergency alert would be the Amber Alerts that we receive periodically. These are geographically sent via cell tower locations. Right now, if we had to issue this type of an alert, we would reach out to the county communications to do that on our behalf. But our police records staff are receiving training here so that we could do that ourselves in the city, should that become necessary. This was the task that was planned for this week. It has been postponed until October 3rd. FEMA has stated that they are very busy responding to Hurricane Florence. So at this time, we believe on October 3rd, all of our cell phones will buzz, and we will not need to take any action, but this will be tested on a nationwide basis. Alert SCC is an opt-in system currently, meaning, as I shared, pre-registration is required. Our Police Records Division actually implements Alert SCC for us. We have been in the process of promoting Alert SCC through various means, through our social media, through the website, and we have promotional materials that are available in 4 different languages. The messages are, how can we warn you if we can't reach you? We've kept it very simple. How can we help you if we can't reach you? Be warned and stay informed. There are currently 2 Senate bills that are on the governor's desk that would impact how we do alert and warning in the county. We expect them to be signed by the governor. And in particular, Senate Bill 821 would be implemented effective next July 1, 2019. And that would give the county the ability for Alert SCC to be automatic. People would have to opt out of it. They would automatically have that automated interface with cell phone carriers so that people would receive those types of alerts much as Amber Alerts are received now. These are examples of the sample materials from the promotional campaign. Sonoma County issued an assessment report in June on the lessons that they learned from their catastrophic fire last year, specifically on alert and warning. And we have a duty in our city to learn lessons that others have learned, even if we were not directly learning those lessons from our own behavior. And I reviewed this assessment report with our fire chief and police chief and fire and police command staff. And as an outcome of our collaborative reviewing of the findings, the decision was made in agreement to form a city-wide alert and warning work group, an interdepartmental alert and warning work group. And so that will be assembled by our new communications director next month. And I'm very much looking forward to even improving how we've been doing alert and warning in our city. So that concludes the update.
Okay, that's wonderful information. Any member of the council have any questions on that? Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Lisa. Appreciate that. Yes, please, if you have on that item. Yes, welcome.
Hi, Stephen Hazel. She's lived for 50 years. She mentioned something about the governor. You know, the governor, that was a controlled breach of the dam. to trigger the emergency federal money? Yeah, I live up already. It was deliberately set, yeah, because the storm didn't really hold. What it was they're holding at 40 CFS, went from 40 to 65 to 100. Should went from 40 to 100. What happened was Bill Croy gets up there, spokesman. He was a no-show. You know, government was no-show. Even that, you wonder why. The Dan's supposed to go over. He was no-show along with Gavin Newsom. So he finally got up there and says, well, $100,000, ooh, CFS, got him right there. I got him. At the beginning, you got him. See, it was a control breach. What's he going to do? He squandered the money for high-speed rail, and so like, hey, you just got to say it was a terrorist act. Yeah, he knew. So the governor, wow, I hate to say it, but hey, we need a new governor and a new lieutenant governor. They both were a no-show. It screwed up my, like, what was it, the Grammys? Was it? Yeah, and even went into it was Valentine's Day. Yeah, and you know what? They could have told him as the dam was going down. It's safe. It wasn't going to break. No. See, I got him. It was 40 CFS. Watch. They got up to about 850. They said they let it like a Baptist. Just go with it. To go with it. Hit the emergency spillway to spark the money. Yeah, to trigger the money. It went from 40 to 65. Held it at 65. Then went to 100. It just went over. Came back. It was just going down. A control breach. Man, triggered the money. A terrorist act. And you know what? They never came out. Anything. Croyle, pull up the tape. Bill Croyle. Got him. He says $100,000. Huh? CFS. Got him. It's other emergency stuff. Hey, it's over, you guys. You know, no more pretending to do good and doing bad. Doing bad and pretending to do good. I know. It's at another level. Now, people, hey, it's the way it is. It's like the devil come in. This is his takeover. And you wonder, I look at even Jeopardy. Why he answers the question. He says the answer to educate you guys. He was like all this stuff. It's over. Because I went to school here, and so did you. And we both went to school with Fritz Moses. And it's a bigger story. He hung himself. But what does that mean? Yeah, the devil tripped Moses, got 2 corners.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Hazel.
2 seasons Mecca. No, I'm not done.
No,
this
no,
is emergency.
no,
this has
you
to do
are,
with
Mr.
mercy.
Hazel.
No,
Thank you.
This is a threat against
No,
the country.
Mr. Hazel,
There's
thank
a weapon, and it's Mecca. Okay, come on, don't cut me off. Oh,
No,
come
Mr.
on.
Hazel,
Are you part of Mecca? Maybe you are. You came up on me. I get a
Mr.
chance
Hazel,
to speak.
thank you. You'll have another opportunity
I still have time.
under public
Where was
presentations,
my time?
Mr. Hazel.
No, this is a
yeah,
moment.
it was up
This
there.
has to be an emergency. I'm still on emergency. Come on.
No, Mr. Hazel,
I know you maybe
it's
was
time
the governor.
now.
That was a terrorist act. You know what? If you were, that's the governor too.
You have one last sentence?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, one last sentence. There you go. Go.
There's always been 2 season Mecca, and it's a weapon pointed at which caused the floods and everything. And cancer, yes. Guess what? Yeah, and you know what? You take an oath. And you know what?
Thank you,
I can't
Mr.
remember before.
Hazel. That's a
and we're
long
going to sit there.
sentence.
It's a
Thank
terrorist
you.
act, not moving on it.
Thank you.
If you don't move on it. Okay.
Appreciate. Thank you, Mr. Hazel. All right, our next special order of business we have is our recognition of nonprofit community partners and city departments providing emergency services to residents due to the Winchester Boulevard apartment fire. So this evening, the City Council would like to recognize the community partners and city departments that responded to the Winchester Boulevard apartment fire that broke out on August 23rd. Upon arrival to the scene, fire crews found the apartment on fire with fire extending into the attic. The fire spread also to 2 adjoining units. Firefighters gained entry to all units on the 2nd floor and ensured that all the residents were evacuated during the firefighting effort. 1 resident was awakened from his sleep and escorted to safety. A second alarm was requested about 15 minutes after the fire department arrived. The fire was contained within 30 minutes of arrival and thoroughly extinguished a few minutes later. Thankfully, due to the quick response by our fire department, there were no injuries. Additionally, Emergency Service Coordinator Lisa Schoenthal, that you just heard from, was quickly in contact with volunteer organizations to assess the many needs of the residents that were displaced by the fire. At this time, I'd like to invite Chief Kelly and Emergency Services Coordinator Lisa Schoenthal back to the podium to introduce the community partners and city staff who offered their time and resources during this emergency. Welcome, Chief Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Gilmore, and members of the City Council. Thanks for this special order of business tonight, highlighting a big team effort to help folks recover from this emergency. Often when the fire goes out, we think the emergency is over, but it's not. There's a lot of need, especially for this kind of fire, which involved 10 units of a 2-story apartment building. So tonight we'll highlight the action of our staff. We learned about the readiness capabilities of our staff. We also learned about the caring nature of members of our community and how they help people in need. And that was during the recovery effort, and that was led by Lisa Schoenthal. So Lisa, you want to start off with the recovery effort and describe that?
Thank you, Chief. Welcome back, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gilmore and members of the council. No emergency manager works independently. We are very much dependent upon strong working relationships with a variety of partners and stakeholders. And you will see tonight exemplified the number of significant people that assisted us with this recovery that is still ongoing. We still do have one family who is living in an extended stay hotel. So I'd like to announce that Mayor Gilmore will be providing special mayoral certificates of recognition this evening to our responders. And at this time, I'd like to invite the mayor and council to come down to the certificate table. And I will be calling our responders' organizations one at a time. And if you could come forward as an organization when I call you up here. And then remain here after you receive your certificate from Mayor Gilmore. The Red Cross Silicon Valley chapter is first up. If you would come forward, please. Red Cross Silicon Valley chapter. And I will say a few things about them while they come up. When the Red Cross responds to a scene, it is like beautiful choreography. And in this case, they provided financial assistance to all of the families and even case management service after that. The families who were displaced received additional financial resources. So first is Jim Malaris, who's receiving a certificate on behalf of the Silicon Valley chapter. Jim is our city liaison and shelter lead, and he is also receiving a certificate for his service. Mr. Richard Lynch was the team lead at the response that night. Jim will be receiving that on behalf of Mr. Lynch. Terry Unter is not able to be with us. He is on vacation tonight. He's also chairman of the board as well as a responder. Jim will be receiving that on behalf of Terry as well. Where Mr. Ken Torin was so encouraged. Ken is not also a responder. He's also the CEO of the Silicon Valley chapter. Was very encouraging seeing Ken there in person. Thank you, Ken. Terry Kearney is with us tonight, who's a responder at the scene. After he responded to a fire in San Jose, he came to help us. Ruben Guevara is also here tonight, who responded after also responding to a fire in San Jose. Stephanie Wild procured and delivered snacks for the team. Jim will be accepting on behalf of Stephanie tonight. And then there was remote support from the Red Cross as well. Neil Catton was the initial dispatcher who got Red Cross members to the scene. Jim will be accepting on behalf of Vicky Baroff. You can see why he's such a great liaison. Vicky Baroff is not able to attend here this evening, but Daria Shuba also is the shelter staffing lead who made calls for the standby shelter teams. So thank you so very much, Red Cross Silicon Valley chapter, and please remain standing. I'd like to call forth the organization for the Lima Family Santa Clara Mortuary. Okay. And this is Mr. Mahmoud Tagve. We are very grateful there were no injuries or fatalities with this incident, but the Lima Family Santa Clara Mortuary provided comfortable meeting space for the Red Cross to assess our families' needs. Mission City Community Fund, Mr. Steve Silva. Mission City Community Fund provided financial assistance for hotel rooms and or gift cards for necessities. Thank you so much, Mr. Steve Silva, who also represents the Santa Clara Firefighters Foundation tonight, who also provided financial assistance for hotel rooms and or gift cards for necessities. Mr. Demel Mistry, representing the Best Western Inn for Santa Clara, is not with us this evening. but we will honor them. I will deliver their certificate. They provided deeply discounted hotel rooms for a family during the busy Labor Day holiday season. Will the Salvation Army Silicon Valley chapter please come forward? So Salvation Army is another wonderful partner. They provided clothing vouchers, gift cards for food. They're making the initial payment for one family who's still in the extended stay hotel. And accepting 3 certificates for each of their 3 offices is Cynthia Sutter-Takal, Director of Social Services, Major Roy Wild, County Coordinator, Bram Begonia, Business Administrator, and Captain Ki-Hoon Oh, Corps Officer. So thank you so very much. The Santa Clara County Office of Supportive Housing was not able to be here this evening. Ms. Michelle Covert, I will be providing her with her certificate. And finally, for me, Santa Clara Fire Department is being acknowledged. Fire Chief Kelly is accepting for the great work, not only fire suppression, but the Fire Prevention Division worked very quickly so the homes could be reoccupied. Thank you, Chief Kelly.
And also, as far as city employees go, our Emergency Services Coordinator, who oversees our Office of Emergency Services, accepting for Lisa, and Jennifer Guzman. Just a few city staff departments, it's important to recognize them for their work. Let's see, Douglas Hanson from Community Development represents their department. They provided the building inspectors to help get that building inspected and make sure the modifications were acceptable to get those tenants back into their building as soon as possible. From Silicon Valley Power, John Rockema. Silicon Valley Power got to the scene quickly and was able to cut the power, which makes a safer environment for firefighters. And they were out there the next day quickly, figuring the best way to get electricity back to those units. Okay, yeah. John's accepting for this entire department. And last but not least, certainly, I asked Kim Castro to come forward from Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec sprung to action and was able to ready the Community Rec Center for a shelter should it be needed. We thank them for that. As you can see, Mayor and Council is truly a team effort here in our community, and we thank everybody for stepping forward to help those in need. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Gentleman in the back, he's getting in that gap there.
It's really nice to know we have our trained professionals on hand to take care of these types of situations, and then a community that opens their arms and hearts and wallets and residences and everything else to help those in need. So thank you very much to all the volunteer efforts and our professional emergency services and fire department. We really appreciate it. Okay, our next order of business is the consent calendar, and all items are approved with one motion unless there's items to be pulled from the consent calendar. Is there any member of the council that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Council, Vice Mayor Watanabe?
2F, please.
2F?
Yes.
Okay, and 2F is action to approve an agreement with Nationwide Retirement Solutions, Inc. as the city's deferred compensation plan administration services provider. Is that the one? Okay.
Thank you.
City Clerk, you have an item to pull or a request from the public, Assistant City Clerk?
Yes, I have a member of the public, Mario Buza, requesting to pull item 2M.
Which item is that?
2M as in Mary.
2M. Okay. And that item is action on an ordinance including elected police, chief of police, and salary setting commission's regular review of elected officials' compensation. Thank you. So 2F and 2M. Are there any other is any member of the public would like to pull an item? Okay, is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar?
Move the balance of the consent calendar.
So there's a motion to approve and second for the balance of the consent. Oh, I knocked myself out of the meeting. Okay, in just a second, please register your vote. All right, that passes unanimously. So next we have public presentations. Do we have any cards for public presentations? Seeing none. So please come forward. Yes. Public presentations. No, that's fine. Oh. Okay. I don't see it, but.
You notice on my card it says to contact my attorney because I came from here and I'm being totally harassed. And remember, I was attacked here, remember, at the meeting, actually by Colstat. I was a member of the Citizen Advisor. Okay, I was a vice president. And I was attacked by the chief of police in Hanson, okay, and they replaced him with Rogers. I haven't heard nothing, man. I'm being like false in prison up there, yeah. You know how much damage that could cause me? My car, my trailer, everything. So, you better check it out. I put on their contact Garagos, Gloria Allred, and Alan Ruby. Both those attorneys. They've been stopping my whatever. Is my time up? Okay. And we'll get back to the dam. Yeah. You know, 93,000 was coming in. So you got to match it or more for the dam don't go over. They made sure it was a controlled breach. And we'll get back to the seas on corner. You take an oath. You know, Mecca is a weapon against the world. Yeah. The Saudis know. And guess what? Through my box, guess what? You stole the ark actually from my house. You found out it was at a box house with a telephone pole in Kirkuk. That was the city. Guess what? Yeah. So it's not just Trump that stole it, and it's in Israel. Guess what? You got it. And you better report it. You know, the Ark of the Covenant. You know, I used to work at IBM. You know me? Remember IBM, I make the call? I am the author of the 10 Commandments. Okay? Guess what? Yeah. Maybe 11 would read, marriage is between one woman and one man. Yeah. Maybe Mahan likes that one. But I don't like this fake do good like that. Even, no, I'm buying it. Fires, no. Because that car fire was set. And you know what's funny is? Dolores Car, remember Rosen. What happened with Maurice Daisma? He died. Alex Wilson, the big story ever here. Why isn't he charged with the murder of Jeanine Harms? Why did they let Maurice out and then Sanchez kills Maurice because he's going to finger Alex Wilson? Because some of the PD, you guys know he was involved. I'm going, whoa, Alex, that's the biggest secret ever. Whoa, they're going to retaliate because of that? Alex Wilson was involved. And Rosen's involved? You got to check that out. Guess what? Sanchez didn't kill himself. He was murdered. He would have figured out he was drunk. They got him to kill him. So Maurice wouldn't snitch on him. He let him out of jail so he gets killed. And that car doesn't start that fire Whiskey Town. They let it blow up. Yeah. And tankers didn't go until the third day. Whoa, blew up on Bonds' birthday. Whoa. And he retaliated at me. You see my car out there. My inheritance from my mom. They've been doing thousands of dollars worth of damage. In fact, they chased me from there's a road rage at King City to all the way down. They went in my hotel room, opened the door, switched everything around, stole gloves out of my car, damaged a peacock I bought at the thing. Man, what's wrong with you guys? And hit me in Walnut Creek with a car. You're unbelievable. So, Gilmore, are you part of the ARC theft? Huh? Because the ARC is above grade. And guess what? Yeah. And I'm the living ARC. And that's guess what? It might just zap you guys. Yeah. Are you good or bad? Are you just fake good but really doing bad? Yeah. I'm not buying it, because you're that one. Yeah. You are, huh? Yeah. Yeah, I know. So you better clean your rearing up because, hey, the night told, but Dan's a fraud, and you know it. So why you give up? Cut your losses, man.
Thank you, Mr.
Give
Hazel.
my ARC back, man, or, oh, boy, you're in trouble. Yeah.
Thank
the
you,
ARC
Mr.
of the
Hazel.
Covenant. Whoa, non-church goer. Watch it, baby.
Thank you, Mr.
12-6.
Hazel.
Bush is HW. You know he's the devil.
Thank you, Mr. Hazel.
HW Bush.
Thank you.
Can't touch him?
Thank you. Any other member of the public want to speak? Please come forward. I don't have any other cards. Okay, seeing none, then we're going to go to consent items pulled for discussion. The first item was pulled by Vice Mayor Watanabe, 2F, action to approve an agreement with Nationwide Retirement Solutions, Inc. as the city's deferred compensation plan administration services provider. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. I pulled this because I read the report, and I was very happy to see that the city was looking out, for the best interests, in the best interests of the employees, especially since this is a deferred plan that people can contribute to, but the city's not matching it. I see it's a 10-year plan, anticipated to be a 10-year plan with Nationwide. Will there be follow-up, to see, like every 6 months or, once a year annually to see how the plan is going compared to how the previous plan?
So we have the Deferred Comp Committee that meets with the provider quarterly. So they come in and tell us how the plan is doing on a quarterly basis. We don't normally bring it to the board or to the council, but employees are welcome to attend those meetings.
Good.
And then we will be bringing forward, we do not currently have like bylaws or anything like that for the committee. So we're actually in the process of working on those and bringing those forward to the council.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to be sure because I know this is their, people's hard-earned money being put away and make sure that it's being.
I want to put in the record that one area that we'll want to bring back if there are issues with the transition of moving funds over to this new provider, or if there's any issues regarding litigation or issues of security while we transition the funds over. That would be something that would need to come to the council.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Finance Director. So Vice Mayor, do you have a motion to approve adopt the resolution?
Motion to approve adoption of the resolution.
Okay, motion second. Any other discussion? Any member of the public? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. The second item we have is item 2M, Mario Boza. And that item is action on an ordinance including elected chief of police in salary setting commission's regular review of elected officials' compensation. Yes, sir, and you pulled this item.
Right. One of the things that I'm here speaking not as a commissioner, but as a citizen of the city. I was part of the 2016 Charter Review Committee. One of the things that was never brought up was to include.
Sorry.
I didn't even wink.
Yeah.
Was to include also not to include the police chief or city clerk. As a matter of fact, a lot of the members of that Charter Review Committee, we didn't even consider the police chief being part of the salary setting or keeping him as an elected official. I believe the city council, is going against our city charter and what the voting public came up with, the voters, when they went ahead and approved the term limits and the salary for the city council. police chief and city clerk was never part of it, and it was not in our charter. So I please am asking you, as the citizens, to reconsider this and try to and keep the chief of police and the city clerk out of this, because it was never approved by the members of the citizens of our city. Okay? Thank you. Look at 42 seconds to spare, but we can talk about the ARC.
This is an item that we had discussed back in, maybe we can have a report from city staff. Was it April, July? We talked about taking all the elected officials and deferring this.
This was an item that was taken, that was considered earlier this year, and we did not bring back the appropriate paperwork to properly have the council, by action of an ordinance, assign the salary setting to the commission. The matter resulted from the improperness of the salary setting being placed with the city manager, myself, and the inappropriateness of having the city manager establish a salary for an elected official, much like I would never engage in setting salary for the city council. The placement of salary setting was placed in the wrong entity within our governance structure, and the council discussed publicly about their interest in assigning it to the salary setting commission. And so this is the paperwork that follows from that action.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill?
Yeah, because I know historically there had been a salary setting committee that had been the members of the council, and they worked on salaries for the two employees that work for the council, which are the city manager and city attorney. And then also the chief of police and the city clerk were added in there. And then a few years ago, there was a lot of confusion or uncomfortableness, and that's where at one point the city manager was asked to do it. And I know the city manager at the time had said to me that he didn't really want to be involved with it. So I think that this was, since what the practice was to have the council do it, that the thought was to have this committee do it would be better than to have the council do it.
Well, and if you recall from those discussions, we talked about the improperness of the council setting the salary, as well as there's no authority for the council to evaluate the elected police chief and set a associated salary with that. And so there was discussion too at the same time when we took up other matters about the governance structure, and this is where this item was assigned during the process of that conversation.
There was a comment made that we would be violating the city charter by having the salary setting commission look at also, it looks like we gave you direction to do this on August 21st, that we would be violating the charter. I just want to make sure that that's not correct.
No, there's no violation of the charter. I mean, it's very clear that the council it's the council, it's only that has the authority really to set another elected official's salary. With this ordinance, what you would be doing is taking it out of your personal review and putting it with a neutral body that was already set up.
An independent charter.
So they would not be acting contrary to the charter. It'd just be additional duties that you've asked them to do. You regularly have take items and give them to, for example, the Historical Landmarks Commission that might not necessarily be their original item, but you seek their advice. Here you're delegating your authority to set the salary by ordinance to this more neutral body. They're not an elected body, and so that was the direction that we thought the council wanted us to bring back to them. It is up to the council to decide exactly what they want to do, but the council is the body that decides how to set the salaries of elected officials. The city manager has no authority whatsoever to do that.
So then this committee would then look at all elected officials' salaries every 2 years.
Well, by the charter, they would look at they look at the council and the mayor.
Right.
And then by ordinance, you've already designated the clerk to go to them, and then this is the remaining elected official that would go to them.
The remaining elected official. Okay, so that's consistent with our direction from August. All right, any members of the council have questions on this?
Yes.
Councilmember Mahan, and then Councilmember Colston.
I can't remember when we changed our city charter to add qualifications to the chief of police election process. Was there anything in there about salary or how it would be set?
There's nothing in the charter about how to set the police chief's salary.
Now, by practice, it's usually just been, it's been followed on as, after negotiations, as a management employee. They just get the same increase in salary and benefits, although the chief didn't get the benefits this year because of some glitch. So it was, he just followed on, just like our fire chief follows on after the firefighters negotiate their salary, just as all department heads and management employees follow on their bargaining units. And that's been in place for a long, long time. And the only thing that it was brought to council for approval. So city manager didn't really set it. It just was set through negotiations and followed on whatever the unit got. Is that not right? I mean, that's been the case for decades as far as I know. Well, to anyone who can answer it.
I mean, I think there was an extensive report given to council about what the council has done in the past, and there were many issues raised among the council members about whether this was the right way to do it. But there certainly is no, the council is free to change its own policies whenever it likes.
I understand that, but I'm not getting an answer to the question about what our past practice has been for so long.
I don't have that report in front of me, but there was a complete report about what all the practices were.
Well, where would I find that report? Because I know, I mean, I've been on the council for decades, and I know that's what we've always done.
The report is a matter of public record, and we can look up the dates. My recollection, and I'm going by memory here, and I hope to remember as much detail as possible, is that there is an improperness of putting an elected position into a management payroll system and follow along or trail the POA. And so there were several things that we were doing incorrectly. We were one, the manager was evaluating the elected police chief, which is improper because he's elected by the people and evaluated by his voters. And secondly, we were automatically assigning, without any disclosure or action or appropriateness vetting, the same benefits that a labor union or bargaining union received with respect to the elected police chief. That was, if you recall, it was an assignment that I felt was improper for a city manager to hold, and the council, by its own motion and action, removed those duties from me. And so there was a lot of areas of self-correction that we engaged in at that time. The Salary Setting Commission on its own, as an independent body, could evaluate the elected police chief's compensation and make a determination to trail the POA, bargaining unit agreements, or any other benefits provided to either police management. But that is a decision that a neutral body who's not vested, non-conflicted should make, not anything that I should make. And so there is a process through this body that they too could hear different detail and take their own independent action.
Our ordinance, as it's proposed here, doesn't have any kind of guidelines, doesn't even say that the council could set policy as to guidelines to give to the salary setting committee. I have some deep concerns about that because it just seems it can be so arbitrary. Yes, our city chief of police is elected. I know it's the only one left in the state of California, but nonetheless, our voters have consistently said we want to elect our city chief, our chief of police. But he's also a department head. It's a full-time employee. He's a department head. We as city council people are part-time. Our city clerk is now part-time. I think that's an end run around our charter, but be that as it may, it is what it is. So I don't have the same concerns. But when you're talking about a department head not being treated the same as every other department head in our city, and leaving it to the discretion without any guidelines or policy or direction from the city council as to how that department head should be evaluated and how the salary should be set, just seems to me a little unfair.
Councilmember Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of things. Recently, a member of the community discussed with me what we had done with the city clerk's position, and their position was that we had to do a charter change. And I tried to point out to them, just to build on what the city attorney said, that we did not change the charter. The city clerk is still an elected person. The only thing we addressed was their salary. In this process, we're not changing anything in the charter about our police chief. He's still elected by the voters. And what we are attempting to do here is to create this body, this salary committee and or commission, and give them the authority to set the salary. I don't doubt that there will be some growing pains and things will be fine-tuned over time, but I've got a feeling that the HR department is going to have a large role in this process, comparing duties and responsibilities of clerks to agencies in the vicinity to see that the salaries are representative. But we're not changing the charter. What we're doing, and I support the city attorney in this, is creating this commission and giving them some duties. And we did that by ordinance, which is the way to change how we do business. I think several of us sat on the salary setting committee for elected and exclusively council employees, and we worked with the manager and the city attorney. And although we weren't directed, we also set the salary for the police chief and the city clerk during that process. And this, I think, remedies that, and it puts it in a kind of a neutral body, the salary commission. And I think the people that are reviewed and have their salary set will reach a better outcome than having the council committee do it. So I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes. So my recollection about this was that it certainly wasn't just about the chief of police, but that's what we're talking about more now because of his stature as a full-time manager of a large, one of the largest departments in the city. So there was some confusion because with the city clerk and the police chief, there was an issue about them getting the bargaining unit raise, and then there was like sometimes a raise that was granted by the salary setting committee, and then in the last couple of years, I think there were some merit increases. So what seemed to be happening is we kind of had a garbled process a little bit, and I myself wanted to be, not to be in the middle of that, and I understand where it's not appropriate for the city manager or the city attorney or whatever to be involved. So I mean, when the idea came up, I thought it was the most independent thing to do with the, I'm assuming the guidance of our new HR director to come up with what is something that's fair and trying to keep it as much out of the political realm as possible.
Thank you.
I'm going to support the motion or the order.
Right. Thank you. Any member of the public, please come forward.
Hi, Hassam Hagag here. I was also on the Charter Review Committee when we discussed twice, actually, whether or not this whole situation of whether the chief of police should be elected or appointed. And there were plenty of reasons, pros and cons for either way. I was certainly in favor of keeping the chief of police elected because we want more democracy and less democracy. And yes, we are the only city in California that elects its chief of police. But the one thing that's really interesting about this situation is that you can't have it both ways. If you're going to be elected, then you're there to serve. Not to say that the rest of the police force aren't there to serve. They're serving with their life on the line for sure. But with that territory of being elected, you can't double dip and benefit from the benefits of being elected, but also the benefits of, like, for example, the collective bargaining units that already are getting those benefits in negotiation with the council in closed session. What I think would be the most fair and appropriate way to handle this, such that it is not only removed from the council's direct purview, But even from the Salary Setting Commission, which is still appointed by the council, even, or not, but it's still another body of folks, is that the salary of the chief of police be tied directly to the salary of the assistant chief. And I know there was some conversation the last time we had this discussion about the situation that happened with with the chief's benefits, that there was a desire to have a pay gap between the assistant chief and the chief of police. But the reality is the chief of police is a job that somebody will run for where they choose to serve the city in an elected capacity. And I think the best way, the most efficient way, and the cleanest way to take the politics out of it is to fix the salary of the chief of police to that of the assistant chief. And maybe the chief at that point, whether it's Chief Sellers or the next chief, would feel slighted by that. But again, this is an act of service. And they have the benefit of managing the entire department. So there's still a prestige or a higher position than the assistant chief, just that the salary, the politics of it is taken out of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to add a couple of things. One of the things that was brought up was to Councilman Kolstad mentions is, well, so we can get an idea from other cities what the salaries are of other cities, of pay their police chiefs and so on. Well, let me make one thing perfectly clear here. Our chief of police here is in charge of Levi Stadium, so 100,000 people at times. We have put the Super Bowl in. We're going to have the college football championships coming up too in January. There's a lot of other venues, concerts, and so on. The police chief is just, you cannot compare our chief with the chief of Los Gatos, San Jose, Cupertino, or any other cities. We're unique. Let's not get a little bit out of hand here. I think the way we were doing it before was with having the committee from the city council setting the guidelines and the wages for the chief of police. And it's to our advantage that the chief of police is elected by the citizens, because we can address any indifferences that we have. Instead of having to come to the city council, we can go directly to the chief, and it's an open door at that department. Before I was even involved with anything, all I ever heard from people is, yeah, we can go talk to this chief. Even coming back from even subpoena, going back a long, long ways. Yeah, you can still talk to him and get, he will take care of the problems of the city. So it's to our advantage. It's a luxury that other cities don't have. So it's best to compensate our chief and let you be the ones that are going to be doing. Don't have a committee of 5 people doing it. And that's the only thing. I think Councilor Mayhem, she was very forthright bringing up a lot of the things in the past. And thank you so much. And still give you 16 seconds. My God.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I just wanted to make it, Councilmember Neal, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, I was going to look back through, because ultimately the recommendation of the Salary Setting Commission, will it come back to the council for approval?
Mm-hmm. So the Salary Setting Commission is interviewed and appointed by the Civil Service Commission. Does it come back to the council for?
The appointment of the Salary Setting Committee does not come back.
It doesn't come back to the council.
What about the decision?
Who's on this? You mean the salary?
Yeah, when they make a recommendation, is that final, or does it have to go anyplace
Well, there
else?
would probably have to be some kind of council action to implement because it would have to come back because of CalPERS rules. We'd have to put we'd have to change the salary schedule. So there would be a legislative act to confirm that. It's entirely up to the council how you want to do this. You could look to them as an advisory body. You could give them guidelines. You could, but you will receive back from them a number, a compensation number that you will have to enact at least as a salary schedule. And
both
so,
for
in public
us and all electeds, right?
I don't know whether the council members are included in the salary schedule or not, but I think the police chief is. Do you know?
And
they
the
are?
HR
the council
director
members
will-
are?
I'm not sure about the council members, but the police chief
The police
definitely
chief is, yes, they are. So there would be a legislative act that you would take to enact the salary chosen by the Salary Setting Commission. You could also amend the ordinance whenever you wanted to. If you didn't like what they were doing, you could say, okay, we're not going to do that anymore, and we'll do it ourselves. So it is entirely within the council's jurisdiction to decide how to set the police chief's salary.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill?
Well, I'm, like I said, I feel like this is a good way to go because it, like I said, it takes it more out of the politics. And I'm assuming that the HR director would staff the Salary Setting Commission, particularly for the chief of police, to guide them. And so it's not like they would just be pulling numbers out of the air. I mean, we would have a skilled professional that would be helping them in that exercise, correct?
That's correct. We will respond to requests for information, inquiries, benchmarking, and also we'll be providing from our finance department a budget review on 10-year forecast, because associated with this is any council action that will need to be taken to implement their recommendations for salary setting as part of your budget. So a lot of guidance, a lot of information needs to be provided. So their situation, or so that their information that they look at is in fact informed by the city's fiscal reality.
So and I would just like to add that the Salary Setting Committee is a Brown Act committee. The public will have, all these meetings will be in public. All of the deliberations will be in public, and the public will have complete access to hearing how they make the decision as well as giving input into their decision. So it will be a transparent process, and so everybody can have input into it at that neutral body.
So it could even be that at that commission that the committee could decide something similar to what Mr. Hagog had suggested, and maybe they would just say, take the assistant chief of police salary and add 10%, or or whatever's kind of standard in terms of I guess you guys call it to not have compaction. They could just say we want to set a policy that it'll be the assistant plus 10 or something like that, if that's what looks like is the best route. I just think if we gave them some fairly, gave them some leeway with the guidance of staff and see what they do in a hopefully, impartial setting.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahan?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question then, because this ordinance as it's written now says that the salary of the chief, or the compensation of the chief of police, shall be set by the Salary Setting Commission. It doesn't say shall be recommended to the council, and it doesn't say that the council has to approve it. So shouldn't that be in here? Otherwise, it looks like plain reading of the ordinance as it's proposed says that the commission sets the compensation for the chief of police.
It is written in a way where the council would not be, the council is deciding, it is giving up its discretion about what the amount would be, but the council would still have to enact that. The council could, at the meeting where they coming back to put it into the salary schedule, into the payment plan, the council could say, we don't like this, we don't like the fact that we gave it to you, we don't like the amount you gave, and amend the ordinance that day. So it's up to you if you want us to change the ordinance.
If the understanding is, as I've heard both you and the city manager say, that and the HR director say that it has to come back to us for approval because he's a CalPERS employee, wouldn't it at least be better to get it right the first time? And this is the first reading, so it's coming back for a second reading, no?
Well, it would come back to you for enactment. They're setting the salary. So the question is, would you want to still retain discretion, or do you want to give all the discretion to the Salary Setting Committee? I mean, you would simply...
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I just thought our city manager and HR director both said that the city council would still have to approve it because it's a CalPERS employee and we need to approve those contracts. Is that not right, is my
You
understanding?
need to enact a,
Not
you need
right.
to, the city council enacts the salary schedule. That's simply an enactment. You could consider that, this is up to you. It's up to how the council wants to do this. The council could say, if you want to amend the ordinance tonight and have it written so it says the salary setting committee will recommend a salary back to the city council and the city council will retain discretion to change that amount, you could write it that way.
Well, I'm not saying, I haven't heard that, well, I'm just asking if what I've heard here conflicts with what the ordinance actually says.
I think in terms of the amount, no, it would be set by the salary setting committee. But you would still, the council would, when it needs to make a change to the salary schedule, which we have to do, that will have to come to the council. And you could just say, well, it was set by the commission, but we're just amending the salary schedule to have that new number in there.
And
No,
that is
I'm not
separate
asking-
from an action of approving an
Right.
actual salary. And that was the intent of my comment. And I believe the HR director is the salary schedule is just the salary schedule that the council approves regularly. A budget action just funds the positions and the associated salary. So those are the two actions that the council, because of its role through the charter, would have to approve.
So you're saying we do have to approve the salary?
I'm clarifying that what I did not say is that a recommendation from the Salary Setting Commission needs to come back to the City Council for approval. However, there are other areas that the council would normally have to approve, like the salary schedule and any associated budget action to fund any set salary setting through the commission.
I understand that, but that may not necessarily, just our general approval of the salary schedule may not comport with the every 2-year schedule and so forth. I'm just asking for clarification because that was part of the problem in the last year's chief's salary, is that it didn't get put on an agenda for approval, and we had to scramble to correct that. So if what you're saying is that this salary has to be approved by the council, then we should, I think, at least clarify it in this ordinance before we get into some further complication down the line, because again, plain reading says the commission sets the salary, period.
And that's an action that the council can take this evening. If
Good.
you want to
I
amend
hope
the
that we
ordinance,
do.
you could make that recommendation. If you feel that it is sufficient and independent as presented, you can also accept that. It is entirely the decision of the council.
Okay, thank you. I'm, the reason we did this is to take it out of our hands, to make it less political, and had it be in front of an independent body. The independent body would then get the type of information that we received. I was on the Salary Setting Commission and committee for the council, and our finance department gave us all the, you know, the salaries and benefit packages from all the surrounding agencies. They would take agencies that were similar to ours, like Palo Alto, that had an electric, you know, utility, and you know, another that had a sports venue and other things, and they gave us a tremendous amount of information. I can tell you, as an elected official trying to set the salary for another elected official, it's terrible, it's awkward, you don't want to do it, you have to work with the clerk and the chief, you have to do all these things. And so the last time we actually had the meeting that talked about the clerk and the police chief, you know, we actually punted it to the city manager because we didn't want to do it. And so I think that you can't have it both ways by still keeping your hands in it and wanting to, you know, make decisions, or giving it to the salary setting committee, which is what we wanted to do. And I'm sure, and we don't appoint the committee. So our hands are off all of this, and it's truly independent. And so it's appointed by the Civil Service Commission. They come back with a recommendation. I can't imagine, just like our Charter Review Committee, our hands were off. They went out, they made their recommendations. They came back to us with their recommendations, and we accepted them. Unless it's a really dire, crazy situation, we're probably going to accept the recommendation of the independent salary setting committee. And so I think we should just move on, let the salary setting committee make, you know, the decisions, because they'll do it independently. They'll do it publicly, transparently, with all of the proper information that they'll get from the HR department and our finance department. So it's being super complicated here when it doesn't need to be. So I'd say we just, I would like someone to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation that's there, that we move ahead and we let the salary setting, independent salary setting commission actually set the salary for the police chief. Councilmember Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. I went over this ordinance while the city attorney was talking, and it doesn't say, it says city positions whose compensation shall be set by the salary setting commission. It doesn't say we have the right to overrule. I have to, it's rare, but I have to agree with the mayor that they should do it. I thought there was a lot of hubbub when we gave ourselves a pay raise a year or two ago. We shouldn't have done that. The salary setting committee should have been the folks that should have done that. And so I think this is a nice outcome, and it certainly does distance us from the whole process. But I do have one quick question for the city attorney. When we talked about open public meetings and that, I'm assuming that the salary setting committee or commission would review the performance of these employees, the city clerk, city police chief, et cetera, and that's a personnel matter. Wouldn't that be, that part of it be handled in closed session?
No. The Brown Act specifically prohibits consideration of elected officials' compensation in closed session.
So that wouldn't be considered?
No.
Like when we have closed session matters for the council, I know this commission would be different than the council about how much of a raise we're going to give our different city employee groups. We do that in a closed session environment with the HR director and you all advising us, and then we take a vote, and then when you come out and report what we voted on. But the actual process is held in a closed session meeting.
Not for an elected official.
Okay, that answered my question.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahan, you have more comments? Oh, Councilmember O'Neill.
So I'm willing to make a motion, but if Councilmember Mahan, if she feels like it would be better that if we added like one sentence in here that says after any recommendation of the salary setting commission for the chief of police will be ratified or adopted into the city salary schedule, if you think, if you and the city attorney think that would be better, to just make that statement that it just, that there has to, but not to say that we're going to change it, but it just has to be adopted so that it's a form, so it's clear that it still has to go through with all the other, salaries that come into the salary schedule. We could make a very simple one sentence if that would make you, and I understand your concern.
If the council desires, we could add a sentence that says the city council shall take all such necessary legislative action necessary to implement the salary set by the.
Okay.
We could add a sentence like that.
That would be fine with me.
Okay, so that's a motion to add that sentence in?
Yes, so moved.
And
Second.
There's a second?
There was
never a
resolution
motion.
with the amendment, and he'll come back for the second reading, I guess.
With the additional.
So we have a motion to approve with adding that sentence in and a second.
Can you read the sentence again?
I'll restate it. We'll add a sentence into the ordinance that says the city council shall implement the salary set by the salary setting commission.
And take all legislation.
Let me start over again. The city council shall take all necessary legislative action to implement the salaries set by the salary setting commission.
Mm-hmm. I'm waiting for the city clerk and assistant city clerk to tell me when you have that sentence.
There we go.
Oh, very good. All right, so there's motion and second. Any other discussion? Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item we have public hearing general business. And the first is action on the community grant policy and amendment of the fiscal year 2018-19 municipal fee schedule to add a no-fee parade permit for Santa Clara nonprofit organizations.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Walter Rossman, Chief Operating Officer, and I'll make a short presentation about this item.
Thank you.
First, I would like to go to the background. There we go. So in November 2017, the Governance Committee discussed and approved the sponsorship policy, which has been pretty much the preamble or the start for this community grant policy in front of you today. We reviewed it further after council approval, and I will explain shortly what the reasons were why we changed the name of the policy to community grant policy. We also looked at the council policy manual, and there's council policy 014, funding request championship team approval, which we incorporate into this new community grant policy. And then in July, by consensus, the council directed staff to bring forth for council consideration a no-fee parade permit. So the community grant policy is really, what I'm outlining here on this slide is the recipients. These are qualifying nonprofit community organizations, athletic groups, organizations, educational groups, organizations, and individuals who participate in events, activities, and competitions. This is more clearly defined in the policy. The reason why we switched from a sponsorship policy to community grant policy was because sponsorship signifies that the city has co-sponsors the event. The community grant clearly says it's independent. We provide the funds, and the organizers are responsible for using those funds for their event. Eligibility criteria are to provide a benefit to Santa Clara residents, students, or schools, contribute positively to the recognition image of our city, align with established council goals, not to be used for political or religious purposes, and be open, obviously, to the general public. The council, through the budget action in 2018-19, actually allocated $100,000 for community grants and continued to fund champion team events and performances as we have done in the past. The difference with this policy is that the city manager is authorized to allocate grants in accordance with this policy and the eligibility criteria, and establishes a standardized process for use of these funds, and it keeps in place all the eligibility criteria and the processes for championship team events and performances consistent with Council Policy 014. The second item which we want to discuss, ask for approval today, is a no-fee parade permit for Santa Clara nonprofit organizations. This no-fee parade permit would include all costs related to a parade, such as the permit processing of the application, or the processing of the application, street closures, hanging of banners, and public safety services. We're restricting it in our recommendation to registered Santa Clara nonprofit organizations and with an estimated attendees of parades of about 1,000. And due to fiscal constraints we're currently experiencing, we're also suggesting to limit it to 5 no-fee parade permits per year. And if an additional no-fee parade permit would be requested by the public or by community groups, this will come back for council for consideration. Obviously, we will evaluate our policy as we're implementing it for the next year or so and bring any necessary adjustment forward if warranted. So recommendations in front of you today is to approve the community grant policy, to rescind the Council Policy 014 as it's now incorporated for the community grant policy, and to adopt the no-fee parade permit with the conditions as presented today and in the staff report. That concludes my report.
So, so are you combining the, I'm not sure I understood, are you combining the championship team fund with the new community grant policy?
We're combining the policy, but we're keeping 2 separate funds, as you see in the first bullet up here. We're still $100,000 for community grants and the $36,000
for the championship
for
team fund.
Yes.
So they'll be separate.
There will
still.
be 2 separate allocations in the budget, consistent with previous budget actions.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Sure. Are there council members that have questions on this? Councilmember O'Neill.
More than a question, and I really appreciate this because there has been a fair amount of confusion, I think, amongst us and in the community, and I've had people reach out to me and trying to understand, because as I've wanted to explain to people, like we've been moving towards cost recovery on a lot of events, and I think in the past, perhaps, things just kind of got done for people, and people weren't paying for it, and then when they were then being asked, I don't think they had a concept of how much it costs to do things. So I think that this is a much better thing. So I know, so one of the organizations that I'm thinking, say Relay for Life, that has used Townsend Field for many years, and it kind of blends over between a number of these things, but I'm thinking that it's an event like that, because it's a 24-hour event and there are hundreds of people that are there, and they're in the state, that an event like that would be eligible to apply. Would that be correct?
Yes, it would be eligible for the community grants.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I read through the policy and proposed changes, and I think it's good. And I see it also incorporates Santa Clara High School. They'll be having their homecoming parade here in the next month or so. And but one question I did have, and I know Reclaiming Our Downtown is looking to bring back the Parade of Champions, and I think they've asked for a meeting to discuss it, but I know that doesn't quite fit into this policy that's being brought before us here. I mean, how would we deal with that in that respect?
So if that were the case, we'd bring it back directly to council with the necessary funding appropriation to cover the cost if the city wants to sponsor the parade at some level. So you would have to, right now it's going to come through the written petition policy as other items have come through. We'll request a description of the event so that we understand the magnitude of cost. And then similar to the last event, the council can determine what level it wants to sponsor, if at all. Then we'll bring back the funding mechanism for that.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mahan.
Thank you, and thank you for these policies. I think they are excellent. And it's time, because a lot of these things we have done in the past, but we needed to coalesce them around some specific policies. I do have a specific question, because some of this, especially around the parade, no-fee parade permit, was brought to light over the Portuguese SES Hall having their parades. And I understand that we can't do anything to support a religion, but they are a nonprofit organization. The SES raises money for non-religious purposes, scholarships and other community needs. So how will this apply to them?
The whole idea of the permit is that it doesn't look into whether it's a religious event or not.
Okay, so as long as it's a nonprofit.
It's just simply, as long as it's a nonprofit and it's under a certain number of people, it doesn't benefit or establish religion either way.
Okay, I don't see any other council members speaking on this. Member of the public, if you want to speak, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Well, I want to thank the Council. My robotics team was a beneficiary of the championship grant. And a couple of things is, I didn't see in the documentation that there was a no repeat policy. I mean, we would love to go to the championships again, but it seems like it would be fair to say if you had it last year, you don't get it this year, because we want to spread the goodwill around to other teams. And then I didn't see any time limits. It seems like it would be better to divide it into quarters and give one grant every quarter or something, so that teams that are, high school teams that are competing in the fall don't take all the money from teams that are competing in the spring or something like that. So those are just some comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Is there a motion from the council for staff recommendation?
Motion to move staff recommendation, alternatives 1 and 2.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I would hope that maybe we could, I mean, Mr. Jane's point about making sure that all the money doesn't get absorbed in the very beginning of the year. I mean, that's a good one. And I mean, I guess, I don't know how we're gonna, maybe we leave it to staff to make sure that maybe perhaps the money gets allocated quarterly or something.
We've had the championship team fund for 20 some odd years and we've never had that problem. So I hope they all keep winning and keep wanting to go so we can fund them all. So please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item we have on the agenda is the presentation by TAP International of the performance titled Santa Clara Convention Center and Convention Visitors Bureau Restructuring Operations Can Strengthen Accountability, Performance, and Revenue. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council Members, City Manager.
I want to introduce, this is the auditor that the council commissioned in May 2018, earlier this year. This is Denise Callahan, the auditor who has completed the work on your council direction.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a principal owner of TAP International, and I served as the lead auditor on this particular performance audit of the Santa Clara Convention Center and the Convention and Visitors Bureau. On behalf of my company, I would like to thank actually the Santa Clara Convention Center staff, the Convention and Visitors Bureau staff, and the City of Santa Clara for their cooperation and assistance during this audit. We had a very short time frame to get everything done, and with their help, we were able to do it. The purpose of my presentation tonight is to summarize a 59-page report in about 20 minutes or less. The reason why we conducted this audit is that the city had concerns about the operations, practices, and financial performance of the Convention Center and the Convention Visitors Bureau. I will refer to the Convention Visitors Bureau as the CVB throughout my presentation. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about in terms of the scope of the performance audit. We didn't do a comprehensive assessment, but we did focus our audit activities on selected areas. Those dealt with financial performance and management, information management, governance, marketing, and then contract management at the City of Santa Clara. So let me first highlight some background information, and I apologize for the formatting. I can tell through a different software application that it changed the formatting. But let me first highlight some background information. First, there are 2 agreements that the city has in place with the contractor, which is the Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce, which I'll refer to as the contractor. And those agreements, they lay out basic terms and conditions. One agreement was called the Management Agreement for the management of the Convention Center, and the other agreement was called the CVB Agreement to operate the CVB. Under these 2 agreements, the contractor was responsible for about $70 million over the past 10 years, or about $7 million annually in gross revenue in public funds. So the contractor and the city have fiduciary responsibility for the operations of the CVB and the Convention Center. And second, on a positive note, as you can see on the chart there, the audit report describes a high level of customer satisfaction with the Convention Center and CVB operations, especially with employee professionalism. The lowest scores, although still high, were in facility condition of the Convention Center and with catering services. Now, we had 3 audit questions that we were asked to answer, and the first audit question was about what is the fiscal health of the Convention Center and the CVB. And basically, here too is another positive note for all parties involved in that the convention center had satisfactory fiscal health because it can support operations using its own operating revenues, which is the goal of any enterprise operation. Its total net income or profit over the past 10 years was about $4.7 million. The yellow circle on the table on the left-hand side there means that the convention center is just below established financial management benchmarks for cash flow. Moving on to the CVB, the contractor managed the CVB's $1.5 million annual budget within 10% in each of the last 10 years, which is another positive note, ending the 10-year period with a calculated surplus of about $278,000. This amount could have been higher, but the contractor in about fiscal year 2011-12 decided not to renew a service that allowed event sponsors to register their conference participants. Those services brought in about $149,000 annually. I'll be discussing other aspects of the contractor's financial management in further detail in just a few moments. Upon further examination of the strength of the convention center's financial performance, we included the CVB's revenues and expenses into the convention center analysis of fiscal health because we wanted to determine whether or not, once you include the CVB revenues and expenses, can the convention center continue to sustain operations. And as you can see in the chart, the convention center would not have been able to do so with an estimated total net loss of $9.4 million. However, that loss may not have been so great if the $14.7 million in facility rental discounts that were provided between fiscal year 2011 and 17 had been curtailed. When you add in all of the discounts that occurred up and through April of this year in 2018, discounts totaled about $16.1 million. Now, although the use of discounts is a standard practice for convention centers, the audit report found problems with their magnitude, including how and why the discounts were provided, which I will discuss again a little bit later on. The CVB's financial value is its impact on city tax revenue, such as transit occupancy taxes. If you were to allocate a portion of the various tax revenue brought to the city stemming from the CVB's efforts to bring events to the convention center and to area hotels, the convention center could have sustained its operations as well as the CVB's operations by the end of fiscal year 2016-17. Now, for our second audit objective, what is the adequacy of structures, systems, controls, and processes that affect financial management of the convention center? The audit found that they were not adequate and that they needed strengthening. The first area that we looked at is in the area of financial management activities of the contractor. First, the contractor did not consistently apply its own policy of revenue and cost allocations for the CVB that may have led the CVB to pay for expenses of the contractor's organization. Second, although revenue and expenditures were generally customary for the operations of the convention center and the CVB, the payment of $303,000 in commissions to convention center sales staff was not transparent to the city and should have been properly disclosed as a separate line item in the budget for proper review and approval by City Council. Although the management agreement is silent on the use of commissions, the convention center is a public enterprise, and offering commissions should have had policy discussions. Also, the $27,000 in bonuses paid in the last couple of years by the Tourism Improvement District to CVB sales staff without an agreement or some other formal contract in place needs further review by the city as to its legality. In other areas of financial management, the audit reports takes exception to the accounting structure set up by the contractor that combines the CVB's and the contractor's organization's revenues into the same bank account. Although there was no city requirement to have a separate checking account, commingling the funds poses a problem and requires strong financial controls, which we found were not fully effective, beginning with partially developed financial policies and procedures and the use of purchase orders that occurred after the purchase had already been made. We also looked at how information management practices were implemented at both the Convention Center and the CVB. And in this particular area, the CVB performed well. It leverages information it collects to assess how well it's currently conducting its marketing activities. But there are multiple opportunities for the Convention Center to improve how it uses the information that it collects. For example, the Convention Center collects plenty of information on event bookings, but it doesn't routinely use that data to assess booking patterns and trends so that can help leverage the financial performance of the Convention Center. We also looked at the contractor's governance activities. When you're dealing with such a large amount of public revenue, you want to make sure that there are strong governance policies and procedures and practices in place. And one of the first things that we noticed was the several actual conflicts of interest that were reported, self-reported by the contractor's own board members involving business relationships. One reported conflict surrounds a series of full-page ads that were purchased by the CVB and ran in a local newspaper, which is published by one of the board members of the contractor's organization. The conflict was reported after the ad was ordered and paid for by the contractor. Because the contractor's own board director reported the actual conflict after it had occurred, there was no opportunity to resolve the issue. However, the contractor stands by this purchase, stating that it was more cost-effective to run the ads in the local newspaper, whose readership reached many corporations in the surrounding area. Another self-reported conflict is the purchase of a convention center contract for mailing and shipping services by one of the contractor's board members. The convention center did not go out to bid or prepare a new contract, which is a standard practice for, again, public enterprise operations. The convention center's position is that it was necessary to allow the board member ownership of the contract because it needed to quickly resume business after the original owner defaulted on its payments to the convention center. These actual conflicts of interest, however, raise concerns about financial self-dealing on a personal and on an organizational level. The audit report describes other problems, including misuse of government assets. In this case, about 50 events annually were allowed to use the convention center, but was not charged for any facility rental. The contractor provided full discounts on facility rental charges that are not consistent with the convention center's own policies governing discounts. And those policies deal with if event sponsor met certain catering goals for food and beverage services, and then they would be offered an offset or a discount. A faith-based organization was given a 93% discount on about $1.1 million in gross facility charges, even though it did not purchase any food or beverage services at the convention center. The contractor saw the need to offer the substantial discount because the event required a lot of hotel rooms at a time when we had an economic downturn several years ago. Complicating, though, the situation is the payment to the contractor was made by the Tourism Improvement District to help offset some of the substantial discounts that were given to the faith-based organization. That particular what we call gift of public funds, which is prohibited by state law, needs further review by the city. The contractor also failed to comply with its own policy of providing 20% discounts up to $1,000 for its members and its member organizations. In these cases, the contractor explained that full discounts were provided on rental charges because the contractor wanted to incentivize membership to the contractor's organization. And some of those members and member organizations did purchase food and beverage, but they were events that required a couple of hours in length. The contractor also misused government-sponsored resources and equipments. When the contractor promoted its organization throughout this year through online newsletters, it used the domain name of santaclara.org, which is shared by the CVB and known in part as belonging to the CVB by its customers. This, coupled with the fact that the contractor did not clearly disclose or distinguish that the resources used for promotional activities were publicly supported. It led to holding the CVB's name out for its own benefit. Finally, the Chamber improperly issued an $8,000 donation to the Santa Clara Chamber Political Action Committee in May 2012. The Chamber facilitated an online fundraising event for the Santa Clara Political Action Committee, and checks were made payable to the CVB. Instead of returning the checks to the political donors, it deposited the checks to the CVB's account, and then issued a check payable to the PAC from the CVB. This situation needs referral by the city to likely state and federal agencies. The contractor and the city share responsibility for all the issues and concerns described in the audit report. The contractor did not implement sound governance activities and effective business practices, including providing insufficient training, which led to the problems that I just described. And the city historically did not implement effective contract oversight of the contractor and did not include many key requirements in the management fee agreement and the CVB agreement that I described earlier, which could have prevented some of the issues. We did examine events surrounding the 2% increase in the contractor's management fee of the convention center. And we found that city staff did recognize that when the contractor used the budgeting process in fiscal year 2016 and 17 to increase the management fee to 2% of the convention center gross sales, the city recognized that a formal amendment was needed. But the city did not follow up to ensure that it happened, and the contractor did not follow up on the city request to prepare a formal letter. So our last audit objective that we were asked to address has to do with what changes are needed, if any, to enhance the convention center sustainability and overall performance. We found that multiple marketing and operational changes are in fact needed. The convention center schedules more single-day events than multi-day events. We estimated that single-day events bring in on average about $1,865 in facility rental charges, and multi-day events bring in on average about $12,000. Although the convention center has booking policies, the guidance doesn't go far enough because there's no guidance on event scheduling for nonprofit organizations or consistent implementation of current practices of giving priority scheduling to events that have greater economic value to the city. Changing how events are scheduled and perhaps moving single-day events to area hotels can increase the availability of the convention center. Last year, there were 32 interested event sponsors, what we call leads, that had to go elsewhere because the convention center did not have available dates to accommodate the multi-day events. Even if at least 3 of the 32 lost leads were scheduled, it would have likely led to 4,000 hotel room nights, resulting in a good economic impact for the city. Marketing structure. Marketing restructuring is also needed. The CVB was contractually required by the city to promote the convention center across different industry segments. These include the corporate segment, service, military, education, religious, and fraternal organizations, what they call SMERF, and associations and very large events called citywides. Citywides are defined as needing a substantial amount of hotel rooms in the city at the peak of the conference. A 5-member sales staff at the CVB at the time of our review was spread across these sectors. If resources were concentrated to market segments that frequently use the convention center, such as the corporate sector, the CVB could have built on its success in those areas. The report also notes that the CVB needs about 3 potential event sponsors to confirm 1 scheduled event, but the number of leads have been declining for the CVB. Robust and strategic advertising is needed because the CVB's limited budget and local advertising that was performed did not translate to a significant amount of leads for the convention center. This is important given that there are 20 convention centers in California that can compete for the same event sponsors. And another key area is event planners always assess catering services, technology, facility size, and the quality of the building facilities when choosing a convention center. The city sponsored an independent facility assessment in 2017, and that study identified 11 key areas that needed attention. Although the city and the convention center are planning to replace the carpet and air walls at the facility, which are the movable walls between the rooms, many other long-term needs, such as ceiling tile and elevator replacements, are needed. Now, the report describes 26 recommendations for the city that cover 5 key areas, and I'll describe these key areas in priority order. In the areas of contract oversight, the city manager should immediately review the accountability issues and concerns described in this report and refer them, if needed, for further examination by the city or by other agencies for potential violation of state and federal law. The city should also immediately reconcile the contractor's allocation of CVB's revenue and expenses, as well as the contractor's credit card statements, to ensure that the CVB paid its fair share of expenses and that the revenues earned was accurately allocated to the CVB's ledger. The city manager, in response to a prior city council direction to develop options for this convention center and the CVB operations, should include a feasibility study to assess the advantages and disadvantages of various business models to run the CVB and the convention center, either separately or combined. The feasibility study should include analysis of financial projections in the short and long term for each option, because although the convention center is self-sustaining, its financial strength deteriorated when we introduced the CB expenses to the analysis. So there needs to be some forecasting on which option and related investment would have the most positive financial return over time. Finally, the audit report describes 16 other areas regarding added contractual requirements, regardless of the options that are to be developed by the city. Examples of other recommendations that were not already mentioned include reducing scheduling same-day events at the convention center to 6 months out versus the current 18 months window, addressing compensation structures for sales staff, developing an integrated and comprehensive business marketing plan, consolidating CVB and convention center accounting systems, establishing conflict of interest requirements, and revamping the city's contract oversight structure. In closing, I'd like to again thank all the contractor employees that participated in this review, and I'd also like to acknowledge the professionalism of the city staff that worked with us throughout the audit. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that complete presentation. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. Well, that certainly is a lot of data to absorb, I think, for all of us. And you know, I guess the good nighttime reading to take the report home and read that very carefully. So, and I think one of the things that I want to highlight a little bit is that what you said, like, yeah, there have been mistakes made all around, and the city has to own up and share a good, good percentage of that, because some of us have had our concerns in over the last few years. The oversight from the city has just been, it seems to be almost completely lacking. And one of the, I have been doing some of my own research back to the city archives, and looked into the situation about where we were 25 years ago when we wanted to have an audit, and the performance audit such as that you and your team have done did not happen at that time, but there was an internal audit. And when I found in some of the council reports that there actually was a letter from Deloitte written in 1987 that talked about some of the cash management and flow, a lot of the accounting, some of the accounting things that you're talking, not in as much detail, but it mentioned that and asked, suggested strongly that that be fixed. And as far as I could tell, that never happened. And so it kind of, we've just gone on our way. But I had a couple of specific things. Like, I know you mentioned about the, maybe if you could clarify a little bit about the kind of the CVB focusing on doing multi-day events and the convention center having its own sales team that did daily events. And I know many of us have gone to, and it's been very nice that there's so many like business groups or charitable groups or whatever. Like it's like the go-to place in Santa Clara County really is to go to the Santa Clara Convention Center, like if your group is having a banquet or luncheon, a fundraising luncheon or a fundraising breakfast. But I did notice when I was reading the activity report that it didn't show any of those like citywide events. So is there kind of like a conflict in the I don't know if there's like a booking logic in terms of how if they have systems that are reserving spaces. So is there like a booking, like I said, like an algorithm or whatever that gave preference to the one-day events, which like I said, I can understand the benefit for the immediate community, but in terms of securing hotel rooms and the like more meals and things like that, that doesn't help. So is there a problem there with whatever systems they use to how they book the space?
Your question raised multiple issues here, so let me start slowly to work through this. At the Convention Visitors Bureau, the CVB, they had 5 sales staff that were responsible for marketing the city and booking the convention center and area hotels. They're responsible for scheduling what we call multi-day events, anything that was over a day. The convention center, they had 1 sales director who was responsible for scheduling same-day events. So it was divided between the CVB and the convention center in terms of scheduling responsibility. In terms of the citywide, the CVB had responsible for scheduling citywide events. They had a goal at the time of our review of scheduling 22 citywide events, but at the time of our review, they were successful in scheduling 2. And there were some mitigating circumstances surrounding that is described in the audit report. In terms of the preferences that are provided, there are booking policies that have been developed by the convention center, but it's more practice than policy. The practice is to provide preferences to high dollar events, but in our analysis, we could not see that really happening because over half of the events scheduled at the convention center were for same-day events. Now, the convention center is supposed to schedule events around the multi-day events that are scheduled at by the CVB. However, when we spoke to the CVB staff, and there was evidence to suggest that they weren't able to schedule multi-day events because either the calendar was not available because they had same-day events scheduled, or there were certain several weeks, for example, the month of December, which a lot of local businesses use the convention center for their holiday parties. So that prevented the CVB from really scheduling multi-day events during that time. So there were situations throughout the years that have posed barriers to the CVB. One of those is that the convention center, which does a marvelous job at scheduling single-day events, I lost my train of thought here because I was moving on to another one, but bear with me. The CVB, one of their barriers that they had is that they were not allowed to really schedule events in the future because the convention center, they were scheduling same-day events 18 months out into the future. So if they had an event sponsor that wanted a 5-day event, let's say in 2020, but it was already confirmed with the same-day events during those timeframes, then it again prevented the CVB from successfully scheduling that multi-day event. So that was a significant barrier that we recommended that that window for future scheduling for these same-day events could be shortened to 6 months versus 18 months. The other issue that we note in the report is that the CVB is also responsible for scheduling events at area hotels. Area hotels, we noticed, was declining in terms of the CVB's ability to schedule events at area hotels. Given that there are so many same-day events at the convention center, they could perhaps move some of those same-day events to area hotels where the area hotels would benefit, and then it frees up the convention center calendar.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So my second question is, you did mention something about credit card or credit card use, and can you elaborate a little bit more about who all was using the credit card and where were those charges going and who was paying them?
Yeah, the way the credit card expense process was set up is that there was a credit card account that was shared by the CVB, the contractors' core organization, and the convention center. So when expenses were incurred, staff, it varied between the convention center and the CVB, but at the convention center, as soon as the expense occurred, they're to submit the receipts to the convention center so that the accounting staff can reconcile the credit card statement when it came in. For the CVB, you know, when we looked at the credit card statements, some receipts were attached, some weren't. They weren't trapped. They were not allowed. They don't submit comprehensive expense reports, so you saw travel-related expenses, but you didn't know whether or not the expense was legitimate or not for travel purposes. I assume there was, because the expenses were customary for CVB staff, but you don't know until you get into it and find out what the purpose of the travel was. And so the contractors organization had one person that spent hours and hours trying to reconcile the credit card statement, which had basically 3 entities' expenses on one credit card bill. So you had in one credit card statement, there was over $10,000 in expenses that had to be reconciled to receipts. So we questioned whether or not it was accurately processed in terms of making sure that the receipts were properly attached and that they were reviewed and approved.
So like perhaps there should have been 3 separate credit cards and with procedures for how to use it. Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Councilmember Mahan?
Thank you. Are you able to look back and track how many actual multi-day events are lost because of a single-day event being booked?
No, that's difficult to do. We asked the question, and it would be too time-consuming. We likely could have done it, but we would need probably a couple of more months to do, and we'd have to really look through all the event schedules and confirmation agreements by the convention center.
And what are some of the single-day events that are occurring?
Yeah, I can just give you examples. Single-day events could be parties, weddings, meetings, business meetings,
But were you able
corporate
to
training.
actually look at what they were?
You can tell by the name of the event. For example, Denise Callahan wedding. That would be the name of the event.
Well, I know our city books a lot of events at our convention center.
Yes, you can
meetings
tell.
and so forth.
Yeah, you can tell what were city events.
I know our nonprofits book a lot of single-day events,
Yes.
single evening events.
Yes.
So there's no way to tell, though, that having these single-day events booked even so far in advance kind of booted out somebody that was looking for a 2 or 3 day convention or trade show or something.
We do know that last year, we do know that there were 32 event sponsors who looked elsewhere at other convention centers because the dates were not available at the Santa Clara Convention Center.
And the dates weren't available because of single-day events?
Because the event, the convention center was booked, whether it's for multi-day events or a single-day events, it could be a combination of both. But we didn't have access to that.
Exactly.
Correct.
Because the reason I'm asking is because our convention center is, in my estimation, it's a great center and it's a great community asset. We're not big enough to, get some huge conventions like, if Google's going to have something or Apple or something like that. But on the other hand, we hit that size where we can serve, especially nonprofits, and there's huge nonprofit one-day events, a luncheon, a fundraising luncheon or dinner or some stuff like that, that not only benefits the convention center, but benefits the community. And so it seems to me a 6-month booking policy for those kind of events won't serve the community because any nonprofit will tell you they have to book their thing, the day they have their big fundraiser event, the next day they start planning the next one. They need to book at least a year in advance. So did you consider any of that kind of business that the convention center is doing?
What we did look at is who books and schedules the convention center the most, and it clearly was the corporate sector. And I know there was a number of corporate businesses in Santa Clara.
For one-day events or multi-day events?
We saw both multi-day events and same-day events.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the report, Ms. Callahan. Going back to the beginning where you talk about the consolidated net income levels, it indicates, it says total discounts of 14.7 million, but then you mentioned another
16.1.
16.1, yes. I'm sorry, how did you get to that 16.1 again, please?
Yes, it's basically the time period of our review, and you'll notice when you read the report, we talk about 14.7 million when we're looking at the fiscal health of the convention center, because we had a five-year period of our analysis looking at discounts for that particular section of the report, and then as we got into the marketing, the CVB, they were great at really giving us all the latest information, and so we wanted to examine the marketing efforts using up until April of 2018, and so we were able to get the discounts to facility rental charges up until April of 2018, and so it increased it by about $1 million. And I do want to point out, like I discussed in my presentation, that discounts are an industry practice for a convention center, but it's how they're being applied that needs to be examined by the city.
Right, and it does seem $16.1 million does seem like a lot of money over a 10-year. This is a 10-year period? It looks.
Yeah. Yes. Over a period of time. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So your audit only went back 10 years?
It depends on what we were looking at. In terms of our fiscal health performance, we try to go back 10 years. We had a projection in terms of looking for the future. We had to use 9 years because we didn't have a subset of information. And then in our marketing analysis, we went as far back as 2011.
Okay, because I mean, the agreement has been in
place for a long time.
Since 1984.
Yeah, it would be very difficult.
So
it would be very time consuming for us to look at the entire 40-year history of the operations.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Then I have a question. Well, I've got several, but going back to the self-disclosed conflicts of interest, you brought up about the UPS facility.
The shipping and mailing services at the convention center, there is a contract. The convention center has a series of what they call partners that provide services to convention guests. One of those is shipping and mailing, and they have a contract in place. There is an original owner, but he defaulted on the lease payments to the convention center. So in order to resume business in the most, in a timely fashion, the corporate representative of that particular contract owner contacted the board member of the contractor's organization, and they're in the process of purchasing that particular contract. We feel because it's a public enterprise operation, the convention center is a city-owned asset, that proper contracting protocols should be followed.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, no RFP was put out to.
No.
Okay. Then let me see. You mentioned an improper donation from the CVB to the to the PAC, and in May of 2012.
Yes.
$8,000. That's the only.
Fortunately, yes, that's the only donation that we saw to the PAC by the CVB.
Okay. And I mean, I would imagine, you mentioned that, that there are federal and legislative laws that are violated as a result of that donation?
Yeah, there could be a number of potential concerns. One is the tax-exempt status of the contractor's organization, so that is a concern. Another concern is, Fair Political Practices Commission requirements, so that could be another potential concern.
Yeah.
And they would have to take a look at that particular incident.
And who would report something like that to the FPPC?
It would be in my opinion, it would be the city.
Okay, and then another notation I have in that particular section, you mentioned that there were 50 events with no rental costs.
Yeah, we saw about 50 events annually that has a full facility discount. Now, the convention center and the contractor would explain that some of those events, like I explained in my presentation, purchased food and beverage, but it has to meet a certain goal. And we did not have the information to determine whether or not those particular events met that food and beverage goal. However, to provide 100% discount on facility rental charges is unheard of in the industry. It's not a common practice. Okay. And that's what we're taking issue is the full discounts.
And many of these discounts were given to members or?
The full discounts were given to members of the organization, they were given to nonprofit organizations in the surrounding community. They were given to county, city agencies. They were also given to businesses in the area. So there was a whole myriad of different types of organizations that received the full facility discounts.
Let me just make sure. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahan?
Does your full report have a list of those that received room discounts or free rooms?
No, but I can provide that information separately to the city at your request.
It.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I look at this, first of all, thank you for giving us the full final report. So we'll take a close look at that. I look at this as two areas. One is how the Convention Center and Convention Visitors Bureau was handling the marketing and advertising of the city and the Convention Center as one issue. And then the other, I look at the fiscal management of the public money through the Convention Center management, the Convention Visitors Bureau, and that. So I think there's a lot of issues on how the Convention Center has been managed in the Convention Visitors Bureau in terms of the marketing, advertising, was it the right way or not? We had actually a full report a couple of months ago about lost opportunities and other things and how much better we should be doing than what we're doing. So we did get that already, but what leads me to have grave concern is the fiscal management of what's happening now based upon your report here, and the money and lost revenues from these deep discounts, some really deep discounts, the tens of millions of dollars of lost revenue to the city, bonuses that were paid in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range that were not approved by anyone or transparent to anyone, conflicts of interest galore, self-dealing, misuse of government resources for political activities, which we all know is something you are not supposed to do, the commingling of the Chamber, Convention Visitors Bureau, Convention Center Management, and what's equally disturbing is the Tourist Improvement District, the TID tax money that's involved in giving bonuses or whatever you talked about in terms of that. The fact that there's one credit card for the Chamber, the Convention Visitors Bureau, and Convention Center Management is enough to say, please look at that credit card in more detail. I mean, that's our responsibility to make sure that that happens and that there's further, review, because there could be potential abuse there. The just complete lack of oversight of the city to be looking at these operations you know, the lack of our contracts manager over these years, maybe looking the other way. I don't know what it is, but we are also to blame for this situation. But the fact that, you know, there are potential violations of state and federal law should concern us dramatically, as opposed to, you know, kind of whether we had a one-day event or a three-day event. There are some serious, serious issues here, serious financial issues. And it's going to take us time to read and absorb this, to see what, you know, some of these next steps are. But whatever the next steps are, we need to take them briskly, and we need to take a strong position to make sure that what has happened stops happening completely, and that we make sure that all that money is accounted for going forward. So I find this so disturbing that, and I thank you for the report. I know there's more work to do, but we need to take it to the next level and find out really how far this has gone. To have discounts for chamber members, I'm a chamber member, I never got a discount, but I've never even heard of it. But there seems to be abuse here. So I think that, you know, I thank you for the report. Give us time to absorb it and go next steps. So city manager, what are our next steps for this?
Well, tonight you're presented with the audit findings from the auditor. I'd like the opportunity to review the report and also provide a written response so that we can bring back for any additional action and answer questions that are here or produce information that's already been requested by Councilmember Mahan on October 9th. And the chamber has a copy of the final report, as they also had a copy of the draft. They too should provide a response if there's anything that is needed for the public to know or for the council to know as part of the October 9th deliberations. And I do have some further action on the agenda later if the council wants to continue with some of the recommendations that I have. But we had scheduled the fourth quarter report after this item, and then we can go into corrective action.
Did the chamber have a copy of this report ahead of time?
Yes, the Convention Center also was given a copy of the draft report. We met and discussed the results prior to us drafting the report. They had an opportunity to review the draft report, and their comments to the draft report were incorporated into the final report.
Okay. Vice Mayor Watanabe?
I'm sorry, I had one last question. Regarding the TID, you had mentioned the TID and $27,000 that was used for bonuses?
Bonuses, which are
Yes.
referred to as incentive pay
Yeah,
by the CVB.
Okay, is that typical? Is that a typical expense? And
is it a typical expense? Well, when you're in a sales industry, it is common to have commissions or bonuses. In a publicly funded organization, I have yet to see it. It is a policy issue that needs to be discussed and approved by elected officials if you're going to have that type of compensation structure. Yeah. What we're pointing out in the report is that the Tourism Improvement District had paid the bonuses to the CVB staff, but there's no formal agreement or any other contract in place that would make it legitimate. As I explained to the contractor, it's akin to having a local school district or a local water district pay the bonuses of another nonprofit organization's sales staff without any bid or contract for services if they were to accomplish a certain level of services.
that was my concern, and was it city money? That's a note that I wrote to myself. So let me ask you then, do you have the documents to back this up? I mean, when you were doing the audit, you do have the documents. Okay, thank you.
So as part of the October 9th council meeting, the TID is under audit right now, and we hope to have, I'll put you on the spot here, do you know the timing of when that audit will be complete?
Yeah, we're currently undertaking a performance audit of the TID in terms of a financial review. We're hoping to have our audit activities completed by the end of October, and then a draft report to the TID sometime in mid-November.
Where are the TID funds going now?
The city is collecting the funds after your action to approve the assessment, and we are we need to talk with the advisory board in terms of how they would like to proceed. Under their bylaws, the chamber is is responsible for their fiscal duties, and we need to understand whether they want to proceed with that relationship and whether we need to disperse funds or not to the chamber.
With the oversight of those funds right now, does the city have oversight? I just want to make sure they're secure.
We have oversight of the funds that have been collected beginning September 1st. They are transferred to city accounts, and then what's happened in the past on a quarterly basis, we would disperse money to the chamber. The chamber does hold a sizable reserve. I believe it's over $600,000, which are public funds, and they are the result of or under the authority of the city's. They are under the city's authority to levy the assessments, and they are in a chamber account.
Is a reserve part of the TID to have that large of a reserve?
I think what happened was there were some mistakes made about how to assess the assessments this year, and so there was a delay in the validation of those assessments for this year, and so there was a concern about potential claims against that, and that's why there were some reserves put in an account. We're exploring right now how to release those funds to the TID. The use of the funds is restricted. This is an assessment that can only be used for a certain type of activity. And essentially the TID board of directors is an advisory board that's enacted under our code via a state statute, and it's that board that has the fiduciary responsibility to handle those funds. So we're working, we're planning, Walter and I just talked about this, about having a meeting with the TID board and discussing with them how you want to handle this. But I think now that we're all on notice about some of these problems with how the chamber has handled some of the funds, that we need to discuss with them whether that's the wisest way for them to handle to have the chamber be the fiscal agent, and maybe they should review that in light of their fiduciary responsibility.
All right, thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask a few more clarifying questions about the TID, in part so that the members of the public understand. So that's the funds that we're talking about, which includes this reserves, that that isn't it's kind of a form of a tax assessed by the city, and I forget, is it on each, is it another add-on to the TOT?
Yes, it's on top of TOT. It's $1 per room per night, and it's collected by 9 participating hotels, and then the proceeds come to the city. They're tracked, and then on a quarterly basis, they had been paid to the chambers for purposes of dispersing and implementing the advisory board's direction and interest of securing bookings and hotel activity.
So it was definitely, it was to kind of increase tourism opportunities and look at different means, just kind of like the hotels also participated in helping to fund Levi's Stadium because they saw that that was an opportunity. So it's a way for them to help us help them build their market.
And
but they are important. It's like a tax. It's taxpayer player
It is
dollars.
important to state these are public funds. You are the authority to levy the assessments, and the mayor. I can't answer the mayor's question about whether 600,000 is an average reserve. I'm just not familiar with other TID reserve balances, but it does make sense to have some dollars in reserve. I think because they are restricted because of the lack of compliance over the past years for how the assessments were levied, whether they were levied properly or not. I think what the TID advisory board will need to consider, as well as the council, is whether there is a relationship that continues given the fiscal mismanagement on these two entities and the sizable reserve that the chamber is holding.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, Councilmember Mahan.
The TID, as I remember, it was formulated around the stadium, the hotel surrounding the stadium imposed upon themselves as tourism improvement districts. It's an assessment district, so it's not truly a tax. It's not a tax that we had to go to the voters on to have approved to be added onto our hotel rooms. It's just the Aitken Stadium hotels that participate, and they voted how to govern those funds, as I understand it. Are we going to hear from anyone from the convention center or the chamber?
Is that a question?
Mm-hmm.
Just the TID was established in 2004, so
And I'm talking about something
community
different.
facilities district that is stadium related.
There was a TID formed in 2013, I thought, around the stadium.
That was Melrose, yeah.
Okay, all right.
That's different. CFD? CF, that's a CFD, not TID, all these acronyms.
Well, it's, okay.
That's a CFD.
Not sure of that.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, if anyone would like to speak, please come forward. Good evening.
Lisa Moreno, General Manager at the Santa Clara Convention Center. Good evening, Mayor Gilmore, City Council, and City staff. As City Manager discussed, we would like to come back with a formal response to all the questions, being that there's a lot, and a lot of us haven't had time to read the final, although Denise with TAP International did send us a draft. There are still a lot of information that really wasn't able to be incorporated and explained. There was obviously, all we've talked about here is a short period of time. So there is a lot of information that can actually be put in a formal response that I think will help clarify some of them, such as what TAP is calling discounts, which are industry, actually what we call refunds based on food and beverage and hotel offsets. So those are things that we can actually articulate better in a formal response that will give you a little more clarity both on the overall policy as well as some of the other items that were brought to your attention.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Nick Caspar, Santa Clara Chamber, registered lobbyist. The Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce, founded in 1947, was established to promote the local economy and benefit the residents of Santa Clara. In the early 1970s, the Chamber founded the Visitors Bureau to stimulate visitor spending and promote the city of Santa Clara worldwide. In the late 1970s, the Santa Clara Chamber advocated to build the convention center to further stimulate the economy. The Chamber has operated the Convention Visitors Bureau for over 40 years without payment, excluding cost reimbursements, and managed the Convention Center for 34 years while being compensated $45,000 for 30 years before adjusting to industry standards. We are proud of the significant benefit we have brought to the city of Santa Clara, providing cost-effective and proficient operation and management of the CVB and Convention Center. With that said, we have improved our organization, and we will use this audit to continue to improve our organization. We understand that the preliminary audit conducted by TAP International has been publicized and released. The draft of it has, but we have yet to receive the final copy. Although many of these issues brought forth tonight were past practices, the Chamber is formally requesting the Council to give the Chamber the opportunity to review the final draft of the audit and address each finding at a council meeting with sufficient time and preparation leading to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm really concerned about the deferred maintenance on this facility. It's in the tens, maybe $100 million. And the CAC entertained the convention center staff at one of our meetings, and they explained that the city was not allowing them to set aside money for deferred maintenance. That whenever money was put away, the city sort of took it for general funds. But to further sort of explain how there's all this mingling of funds, I refer you to the January 30th 2018 City Council meeting, item 13.B3, where the city, this council, approved $468,000 in electrical services at the Santa Clara Convention Center from general funds. It says the Building Maintenance Division receives work orders for electrical repairs and minor electrical service modifications for multiple departments and the Convention Center property manager. So there was that item, and then there was a $200,000 painting contract for work at the Convention Center coming out of general funds. So this mingling of funds is just rampant. So I just refer you to that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I don't think we included any of the capital improvement costs in the costs of the convention center. I think the monies we're talking about are just operations. But I don't recall ever saying no, don't, or taking their money that they put away for capital improvements and using it in the general fund. Maybe we can look into that, because I don't recall ever talking about that ever. That there was funds available for capital improvements that we used elsewhere.
Would you like?
Yes, City Manager.
The city provides, as part of its annual budget process, and particularly as the capital budget, the city does provide for some repairs and maintenance. It is low. It competes with all the other city priorities for service. And it really gets down to, and it's part of some of the corrective action and policy questions that the council will need to deliberate between. It really gets down to whether the council wants, as a business model, a cost recovery business model or a subsidized business model. And I think we need to go through that exercise to better understand. If you go cost recovery, this is what you get and the types of models you look at. If you go public funded subsidized, which appears to have been the model here, then here are the business model options that you have, and we'll get through that over the next couple weeks. So that's what we're going to do at some point, you said in October? I'm hoping to start that on October 9th.
Okay, that's great. All right, thank you. I'm sorry, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Councilmember Mahan?
Yeah, I do want to speak, because when the convention center was first conceived, it was conceived along with having a major hotel connected to the convention center and a brand new concept, the Tech Mark. And it was all on city land, it was all on redevelopment agency land. And so we were getting the tax increment revenues from that. And so it really wasn't truly a subsidized model. It was an enterprise model where the revenues from those revenue streams from those other enterprises would subsidize the convention center, but not general fund subsidies. And it worked until Governor Brown took away the redevelopment agency. So I think that's part of what has gotten us to this position right now, is that great model that we had that actually did make a lot of money for the city when we had those rent revenues, those lease revenues coming into the city as part of that whole convention center complex. It worked. It was novel. It worked. It was something that Santa Clara was way ahead of the game in doing, as opposed to many other cities in the state. But that model is no longer available to us unless we decide to repurchase all of that land out there. So I think we're in this position through nobody's fault, per se. I think there's a lot of blame on both sides, city side and convention center side, chamber side, CVB side. I don't think anyone acted in bad faith or ill will. I don't think anyone ever meant to rip off the city or do anything that was nefarious. I think it just was a matter of many years of practice and many years when we had lots of revenues coming in from this complex, from the convention center complex. So I really want to see the response from the chamber. It saddens me that we don't have an operating CVB right now. I'm not sure how you guys are limping along, but hopefully we'll get that resolved in the future. And I just think I think we just need to relook at it in light of today's circumstances. As the city manager pointed out, are we now going to move to a public subsidized model, or are we going to move to a cost recovery model? In doing so, we have to realize if we go cost recovery, we are going to lose a lot of the community benefit that our convention center now provides. For instance, our Mission City Community Fund dinner this year, for years we got a free room. We got a great menu for a pretty good price because the convention center worked with us because they knew that our board, our event provided a lot of funds for a lot of people in need in our city, a lot of our residents who need the funds that we give out every year. We no longer have that privilege. So those are kind of the things that we have to weigh in the balance to see where we want to go with this. You know, it is a public building. It's on public land, and it can provide public service as it has in the past. But as I say, we haven't made that fundamental policy decision because up till now we really haven't needed to. But it wasn't ever a choice of where we operating on one of those two models. As I say, we had our own special model, and it worked when we had redevelopment agency and we got the tax increment and we got the ground lease revenues. But now we're under a period where we're going to have to change.
Councilmember Kolstad.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to say I agree. Shame on us for not overseeing this properly and allowing these things to happen. And I would also add congratulations to the staff and our auditor for doing an excellent investigation and finding these things out. In the staff recommendation, they asked that we note and file this report from our auditor. And I would like to make that motion, Mayor, with one caveat. The Convention Center and CVB staff have asked for some time to prepare a response. And I think in the interest of getting a more rounded opinion, we should accommodate them and give them time to respond back with their explanation for each of these issues. I think the city manager said that on October 9th, we were going to hear more about this. And I think if the CBB and the Convention Center and the chamber staff have that much time to get a response, that would be very helpful in deciding how to proceed. So that's my motion.
Okay, motion to note and file, and that we'll be having the next presentation October 9th, and the chamber will then respond at that time. We'll have a full discussion at that time, October 9th. Is there a second? Second. Motion second. I had a question, city manager, or maybe the auditor. Did the chamber respond to the draft audit? Was there a response by the chamber when they were given the draft audit?
They were given a draft. The chamber and the convention center was given a copy of the draft report. The CVB was no longer, so I couldn't send it to them. And they provided extensive comments, a lot of explanatory comments that were incorporated in the report. I believe of all the comments that they provided, there was, I believe there was one or two that I just didn't have the evidence to update the report.
So they provided extensive comments already.
Yes.
So they're going to provide more extensive comments then to the final audit? Is that what we're going to be waiting for here? Okay.
I don't know, but they were dozens and dozens of comments.
They've already provided. Okay, but that's fine. We'll hear it October 9th. All right. Ravinder Lal, you have a card. Please come forward. Yes, sir.
So I'm here to stop some of the not truths about myself in the mailing and package receiving in the convention center. So when I was asked for my conflict of interest form, I put that I was in the process of purchasing a private business which leases space inside the convention center. When you purchase a private business for money, nothing was gifted or given or anything else. Matter of fact, it's not even a done deal. Auditor never spoke to me, never looked at the contract, never said, hey, what's going on with this deal? And I'm up here to make like I am giving myself all kind of bonuses and all this other stuff. And it's false and lies, and I resent it. And I'm here to let the world know that, you know what, I'm the most honest guy in this room. And to sit here and say I'm a self-dealer because I'm trying to buy a private enterprise is ridiculous. Matter of fact, a private enterprise which was literally going out of business that day. Anybody could have went in there that had the money and bought it. So to sit here and say I got something without an RFP, how do you RFP a private business that has a contract? It's ridiculous, it's ludicrous, and I have to question the auditor if they didn't even follow through thoroughly. And not only that, a conflict of interest is if I made votes for an organization for my own betterment. Never happened. Check every minute there is. Check them all. That never happened. So hopefully you guys clear my name as much as you've run it through the mud. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have a motion and a second to note and file and the report. And thank you very much to the auditor for the report. And we'll be back here talking about this on October 9th. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. All right. The next item we have is action on the Santa Clara Convention Center and Convention Visitors Bureau fourth quarter and fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018 financial status report.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before you tonight is the fourth quarter Convention Center and CBB report. And this is provided by agreement 30 days after the end of the quarter. And it is prepared and presented to the city by the Convention Center. And I know that as you've seen, Lisa Moreno's here and she can actually address the actual report. I do want to call out that the Convention Center was unable to provide the CBB report. Normally we get the list of different hotel rooms and other things that the CBBA usually provides. And Lisa Moreno also provided a letter explaining that they were unable to provide that information at this time. So I can turn it over to Lisa if you like to have a question.
Did each of you receive the letter with the explanation? It had to do with the dissolution of the CVB and not having access to a lot of the reporting. We are working those details out, so hopefully we'll be able to do that next time we give you the report. Was there any questions on the report itself?
I thought the employees were paid up until a certain time. I know the city sent money over to pay the employees.
They were paid through August 29th, and they were put on administrative leave and allowing them to go look for jobs, but they were paid through August 29th. So the chamber decided that they would allow them to go out because there really wasn't a lot for them to be doing, and a lot of them were thought it would be best that the chamber made the decision.
Were they the ones that prepared the reports normally?
Yes, for the CVB specifically, there's two software programs. One is called CVent that actually did a lot of the lead generation, as well as SimpleView, which had all the data. So we are now getting licensed to do that on our own and going through some training, and then we have to find people to put all the data entry in. So that's critical to have that information so it's accurate, because we didn't feel also if we even retained some of that, if it was accurate.
All right, thank you.
Was there any other questions on the report?
Hold on one second. No other questions.
If I may
Thank you.
take the time, we did end the fiscal year with a 2.2 positive revenue back to the general fund, and I would like to congratulate our teams, and even though the CVB is currently not here, they were a part of the team, so I would just like to congratulate them. We did have a record year of generating over $9 million and with a 2.2.
I'm just, those numbers are thrown out all the time, but unless they're corroborated by our city, I mean, I appreciate the numbers, but some of the numbers we're getting don't seem to match those, so.
But they are in the financial reports. The convention center revenue in which I'm explaining to you is specifically for the convention center, and those are in our actual financial reports that the city finance does quantify.
All right, so thank you.
The staff report states that the council provided a 60-day salary appropriation for the CVB staff for the purpose of transition closeout activities. However, the chamber released the staff in July and did not follow proper closeout activities for the fiscal year. When the chamber received the check from the city, it was an $80,000 check. I actually reached out to the city asking what the scope of work was, what the expectations were for this 60 days following that. And the response was that without a contract, there was no scope of work or expectations for these employees, with the intent to provide the affected employees with flexibility to determine what was the best course of action for their respective futures. The city also stated, as their employer, the chamber may choose to redirect their scope of work or let the employees go. So when we reached out, we asked what the scope of work was for that money that was delivered to us and what the expectations were. And it was not to close out the fiscal year. It was that we were the employers and that it was up to us to find the best course of action for these employees for their futures. So the chamber, what we decided to do was close out any existing clients they had. And with this industry, it's based on trust. And so we gave them, I believe it was 3 weeks to close out any clients, any leads that they had. So then it wasn't, they just didn't stop picking up the phone. And then we did put them on leave. So then they had a couple of weeks of paid time to go look at another job. And so it wasn't that we didn't follow proper protocol. It was that was the direction we were given, and then we felt that was the best course of action for the CVB employees to find an alternative job. So,
all right, thank you for that. Thank you. Any other member of the public?
I had some questions, actually.
All right, Councilmember Mahan?
Yeah, I thank you. I did have questions either of Ms. Moreno, I think, on the report on the convention center on the fourth quarter. So if I'm looking at this right, it shows that this was just the fourth quarter that you had total revenues of $3.3 million. Is that right? This is just the fourth quarter report that are these cumulative for the year?
That is the fourth quarter report, so that would just reflect the fourth quarter.
And then when you have $5.6 million in economic impact, direct economic impact, what does that include?
That would include all of our partners' revenues, space rental, food and beverage, all those types of revenues that are generated.
Does it include TOT from hotel bookings?
No.
Or that's okay, so that's just
that
your
was separate
at this
from
convention center.
the CVB portion. Formerly was put in there as it relates to that,
okay.
but this is separate. This is the convention center financials only that's reflected in that particular report.
I noticed that you had 16 multi-day events and 83 single-day events, not counting banquets. But the single-day events had generated over 50,000 attendees and generated a third again as much revenue. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's part of, I think, to the point of further articulating. I mean, we did have the opportunity to respond to the draft. However, there was, I think we had maybe 2.5 days. So articulating further as relates to really breaking those down, we didn't have time for instance, industry standards. You would literally have to go out and do further research to get industry standards from different convention centers. Obviously, you would probably want that information in the report, such as Pasadena or anything like that. So, but as it relates to multiple day events versus single day events, the convention center in-house staff does both. And they can bring in a 1 to 2 day piece of business, even a 1 day. They could actually bring in over $500,000 in food and beverage alone on a particular day. So there's just a lot of variables when you're booking a convention center. So there's a lot more explanation that goes into 6 months versus a year 18 months. And we do have policies in place for types of events that can be booked, whether it be 6 months, 1 year, or 18 months out. It's not just given priority just because. So, but yes, a single day event can bring in a substantial amount of money to the convention center itself.
Okay, I'll look forward to getting more of that information by October 9th. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I had one other thing too, that it looks like there was a lot of discounts, like in the millions of dollars, that was talked about in the audit. So you said that you'll explain why those discounts were given, and if so, I'm hoping that you can talk about, did it lead to an increase in business by giving discounts
Absolutely.
to all the chamber members and whoever else
And
you gave discounts to?
They're separate. There's the 50 that she called out annually, and then there's the discounts, which we did ask to be called refunds, because that's really what they are. And again, that can go into further explanation. So those are two separate ones, but yeah, absolutely they'd be in that explanation.
Okay, so I look forward to those explanations.
Sure.
Thank you.
So do we.
All right, Councilmember Colstead.
I'd just like to make a motion to note and file.
Okay, motion to note and file in second. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Okay, so the next item we have is direction on management agreement with Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce and Convention Visitors Bureau for the Santa Clara Convention Center. City Manager.
Mayor, I've actually prepared a PowerPoint that covers all of the items, and then so that you take them as a whole, since these all seem to be interconnected, and then we can go to the separate action for the next two reports. Is that fine?
Okay,
all right.
That's fine.
So, as I just mentioned, I wanted to go through all of the 4 items since they are connected, and it does end with some corrective action that I think we need to take sooner than later, just given the audit findings. I first want to state that an audit is just part of a regular business due diligence, and you as a city council have a responsibility to conduct audits. There is audits referenced in the management agreement for oversight of the convention center. And it is interesting that over the 30 years, there was no formal performance audit. I think it's already come up, and I've said this before, that the city did enable a very high-risk environment without any internal oversight. And we've talked about several different exposures over the course of the last couple of months. There was no, and just because there's already rumor circulating, there is no city council policy action to sell the convention center or repurpose the facility. I just wanted to make sure that was stated, since it is out there already. I introduced this slide after my first 90 days with the city of Santa Clara and shared it at the priority setting session. And I shared the connectedness between council implementation and operations, the normalness of audit review and the outcomes that provide metrics, and then policy legislation and changes that the council should consider. At the time that I showed this slide, I talked about current absent items, and I highlighted the red ones because I think, in fact, this is a great case study for what happens in high-risk environments to public organizations when there's an absence of oversight. We talked about program management, contract management, process audits, and internal controls. And then we also talked about the limited capacity for risk management. I had the opportunity to go to a training over the summer in auditing, and it reminded me of this chart. And I was very interested in that the professor, this was at the Harvard Business School, the professor said that everything starts with auditing. And once you have your audit results, you identify your readiness for creating opportunities and innovation. And I think that's where we are tonight with the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have a foundation of where we're at, the opportunities and the challenges that are before us. And I also think that now through this chart, the professor said audit has to be first before you can do the rest of those. So my next chart in January, I will put audit first. But I did offer some dates in here that we are being presented with the audit outcomes. On October 9th, we'll have some policy legislation and responses before you, as well as over time, depending on the council action tonight and on October 9th, we will have implementation of the issues around operating the convention center. The benefits of the audit, I think what we found is the internal control systems, our contract management, our risk management, IT systems and data collection, and our fiduciary responsibility. I do want to acknowledge that the council has been very receptive and supportive of these efforts to self-correct by adding a contract manager for citywide contracts and our administration of them, by adding a risk manager for which we are in process of recruiting for, as well as establishing a council-appointed auditor that already is in place and functioning. So there are some good signs around acknowledging the benefits of audit. This is clearly a case study for us in terms of how we manage forward. I also want to just put out here, it's already been stated, so I don't want to touch on it too much. There was never a performance audit. The city completely lacked oversight of contract management. In fact, our own internal control shows that we do lack record keeping, as well as just oversight within our own organization of the operations and activity. We did not uphold our fiduciary responsibility with public assets and public facilities and public funds. I think that goes without mention any further, but I think it's important to keep that front and center. We all have an obligation to uphold fiduciary responsibility, and this is a perfect case study. With respect to council action, and this is just a reflection of the work that you've already taken to date, on May 22nd, you asked for a term sheet for a new agreement with the chamber to begin a process for financial and performance audits, as well as suspend the management fee until such time is completed. On the CVB contract, you allowed the contract to expire. You provided 60 days of salary pay for transition and closeout of services provided by CV employees. We have completed 2 of the council directions, the audit, as well as the suspension of management fee payments. What's open is the term sheet for a new agreement, as well as the closeout for the CVB services. And you've heard some issues already today from the audit that inform you where we need to go next. I do have some concerns about sitting down and coming up with a term sheet on a new agreement with the chamber, just understanding the findings that we have, as well as the governance and the mismanagement. We'll want to understand that more to determine how is it that we proceed, but those are further conversations that we'll need to have. I do want to state that the convention center continues to operate. It has oversight and day-to-day management at the convention center. They continue to hire staff. There is limited resources for marketing, advertising, promoting, and booking events. And as already mentioned, the Conventions Visitors Bureau did expire on June 30th, and there is an absence of the bulleted items that fall below the services that were funded by the city. So what's important to mention with respect to the management agreement is that it's still in place with the chamber. They do have legal oversight of the operations, which, as I've mentioned in past information reports, it does limit the ability for us to further implement corrective action with respect to temporary bookings or services that the council directed us to proceed with. I did put several information memos out as well as state publicly that to the extent that the governance is this way, I cannot fully implement the direction that the council provided with respect to upholding those services. I do think that, I'm not certain if I do think it's important, and we'll walk through the numbers, that the exposure of lost revenue and through subsidies, and I am interested in hearing the response from the chambers. By our accounts of public funds, the exposure is $37 million, and I'll just provide a walkthrough. There is significant problematic accounting and unexplained expenditures. This was presented in the draft. We validated it to see if it was in the final, and I think the auditor was able to articulate on some of the main concepts regarding problematic accounting and unexplained expenditures. There's more in the details of the audit. So here's the exposure of the $37 million. The facility discounts, as already stated, amounted to $16.1 million. The free facility rent, which was exclusive for chamber members or insiders, and I think what's important to talk about here, it equals 2.8, but this is a public facility. It is a public asset. And I think that got lost in the members' comments about moving in a private business. There's issues of equal access and competition so that the full community and public has the opportunity to participate in whatever offerings are provided for businesses, such as contracts. You do a competitive bid process, it's transparent, you report out. But this is obviously an area that we'll want to better understand from the audit findings as well as from the chamber. The bonus payments, as already stated, equaled about $300,000. The auditor put in the record the issues with that. We did talk about the general fund expenditures at $2.4 million. We want to understand the relationship. The audit does say that these discounts came at the adverse fiscal impact to the city. I think we'll want to understand whether there could have been a larger amount of investment in capital expenditures had the discounts not been given at that rate, or the council could have had a broader policy discussion understanding the discounts and its relationship to the business and the need for further capital investments. The annual payment to the CVB equals $14.9 million, as well as the management fee. So that's how the exposure of public funds is accounted for at $37 million. What you'll see in the audit is, again, the positive direct benefit from TOT, TID, sales tax is $11.3 million, and then as well as the convention center net income of 5.2. And so the total net impact, once you discount from the 37 million, is 20.5 million for the term audited. Already mentioned the audit findings. There are some indicators here about the misuse of government resources for personal gain, inappropriate bonuses, and then the potential or the potential of a violation for tax-exempt status, as well as the conflicts of interest that need to be further reviewed by an outside agency. We should express some concerns in that regardless of whether the city allowed for the CVB agreement to expire, the chamber still holds the management agreement oversight, and in that agreement there is a requirement for reporting on financial activity. And so the agreement, they still have the legal authority to operate, and there is the requirement, regardless of which staff are in-house or not, they do have a responsibility through their legal agreement to provide the reports. It's up for them to assemble the resources. We don't direct their resources. So I have some concerns about whether the chamber is positioned to manage the city's public assets with respect to the findings of the audit, the absence of clear understandings of conflict of interest. I think some were displayed this evening in some of the comments, as well as the lack of information in the report that you have, and having the convention center staff and the chamber staff get up to speed at a time when you need data most to make policy decisions. So in terms of corrective action, I've already acknowledged the high-risk environment that we allowed with respect to our own in-house monitoring or lack thereof, and the lack of dedicated staff. I have watched the convention center project, if you will, move through about 3 or 4 different staff members just in my short tenure here. And I think that's important. It was really reflective around our own poor internal controls as well as the monitoring of the contracts. I've also stated publicly that during the time over the last couple of months, it has been a collateral duty between Assistant City Manager Ruth Shikata and myself, which is really not a sustainable option. This just states the further comments that I meant about splitting up staff into different collateral assignments and no record keeping, as well as knowing that the TID, which is a great example of just what happens when no one's at the wheel. You lack compliance with state law over 10 years, and we'll see what the audit findings present. I mentioned here that we do need to have the conversation, and I want to thank Councilmember Mahan for clarifying the history around the redevelopment. The past years have been one of whether it's subsidized or whether we should expect it to be cost recovery, but the council as a policy-making body has not established that, and I think that's an important first step to understand the business model that we'll want to pursue. So the corrective actions that I think are best positioned for the city's interest is to issue the 180-day termination notice. We have to do this regardless. The management agreement that is under the Chamber's, or that is with the Chamber of Commerce is over 30 years old. It no longer serves its purpose for the current governance of public funds. And so I think it's in our best interest to begin that clock and pursue other options of which the Chamber can fully participate and demonstrate its creativity with managing the convention center. We do need to cooperate with the other agencies for which we'll need to report this information now that we know it. And we do need to look for as part of a competitive process, which is required with public assets and public resources and facilities, to look at what is the best deal in the public's interest, recognizing there's a component for community benefits, recognizing there's a component for generating dollars to invest in back in the convention center, and of course, as I've already mentioned, the Chamber would be welcome to submit a proposal. We already have consultants on board through the past work that the council has commissioned to help us with incorporating the best contract management practices in a proposal, so that in an RFP, so that we can seek qualified proposals that show us the professionalism that we can bring to managing the convention center. And I'm also proposing that we add staff within the city so that we can begin to administer the RFP process, implement the audit findings, and there are a number of them, as well as some likely on the horizon with the TID audit, to close out and finish the reconciliation work that comes with the credit card bills and comes in with the closeout of the CVB, and manage going forward and improving the oversight and looking at our own systems in-house. My work plan and my timeline, as I would propose, is you have in front of you as a post-agenda packet is a sample letter that we could transmit to the Chamber. We'd want to come back on October 9th with a fuller policy discussion. You will have had the chance to look at the final audit. We will have had the chance to work with the Chamber for their response as well as our response, and bring forward a more robust policy discussion about moving forward. I would like to get direction on proceeding with an RFP on October 9th and work with JLL, who's already under contract, for a framework and a scope of work. And then also bring some business models here for the council to consider. The goal would be to release the RFP during the week of October 15th. with proposals and council action in the January, February timeframe, and then transition after that. And so we think this is ambitious. It is during the holidays, but we think we could do this over the next 6 months. We have consultants on board. We have audit findings with respect to the innovation and creativity and the problems that we need to solve. We do need to bring in the resources that in-house for the city to be able to support this effort. And with that, as part of our own internal corrective action is, I do want to bring in two positions, and I see the first is an assistant to the city manager to support the convention center and all the other reconciliation efforts that we just talked about. We do have a need in the manager's office for some additional admin support, and so I'd like to bring in an office specialist so that we can get into record keeping and keeping the public documents in order. And what I envision here is that this would also provide some support for the Stadium Authority, for which we also want to keep good public records on our side, as well as some additional contract funding of up to $100,000 to close out the CVB contract, to reconcile the issues, and to work with the auditor on completing that reconciliation and closeout. We are asking, you've already taken action to note and file this financial status report. And that's the remainder of the action with the last two reports, is that you direct me to issue the termination notice under item 4C, and then under item 4D that you consider my request to add the necessary in-house resources and amend existing contracts as needed, and issue contracts for additional reconciliation activity up to $100,000.
Okay, thank you for that report. Councilmember Mahan, you have questions, and Councilmember O'Neill.
Comments. So if you want to take questions first, I'll hold my comments.
Comments? Both.
Go ahead. Okay. I have a number of comments. First of all, as I sit here, knowing the long history of our convention center, why it was started, how it was started, what the concept was, and I'm looking at the 4 people here today from our chamber, from our convention center. These are hardworking people. They've served our city for years. When I don't see the former CVB employees, all of whom were just fired summarily, they served this city for decades. You've made a lot of money for our city. When I think of the chamber board members, all of whom are volunteers, they've served the city to the best of their ability, certainly with dedication, for years, for decades. We've had so many accusations here. I can't even call them allegations. They're just downright accusations, some of which I think are, I can't say unfounded, and I can't say they're trivial, but I can say we haven't had a chance to hear the other side. So at this point, they're uncontroverted. And I want to hear the other side. I'm not prepared to take any action until I hear fully from the other side. It's just not fair to you. It's just not fair. It seems to be that's the way we do things in the city, that, you know, where's our cooperation? Where's our, where's our respect for one another? Where's our dealing in good faith? I don't say that some of the audit findings are trivial, and I don't say that they don't need to be corrected. I'm just saying that we ought to give these hardworking people the chance to work with our city cooperatively, not adversarially, but cooperatively, to try to fix it, to cure it, to correct these things, to come up with a contract that works in 2018, certainly not the contract that was done in 1984. It can't be expected to work in 2018, but whose fault is that? That's our fault. The city is the one that never updated the contract. The city is the one that never audited the contract. The city is the one that didn't do enough performance audits early on so that we could keep on track and keep up with the changing environment of our city, of our population, of our growth, of the dissolution of our RDAs, all of those outside changes that have affected how the convention center should be working and how the contract should be implemented today. But as I say, that's our fault, and I really would like to see us give this a chance to work, because I think you all have worked so very hard for so very long that to be treated in this manner, I think does you a disservice. So as I say, I'm not prepared to take any action until at least we hear the other side and I get a full report. And I haven't even seen the full final report with all of the detail that's been put up here tonight. So I don't even know exactly what these allegations are based on. And I need to educate myself on that, and I need to hear from the other side.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Okay, so before I make some comments, I just wanted to clarify, like there was JLL was mentioned in your presentation, and I know that we had talked about having them get engaged. The council suggested bringing them in a couple months ago, but at this point, because I know once again I've read various things out on the internet, and has JLL had any involvement in the last few months, or would we just be bringing them in now to do the RFP?
They have had no involvement over the last few months while the audit has been completed. They are under contract. They have confirmed that they would not bid, so they're not conflicted, and they could help us with developing the RFP language so that we can renew and modernize the contract.
Okay, great. So, I concur with Councilmember Mahan that the city, we have a lot of the responsibility to accept for the situation that we're in. And, it's unfortunate. I mean, there have been attempts at different points to have this kind of audit done, and there was not the support to make sure that that happened. So now we're finally at a point where we're doing it, like I said, 25 years after we should have done it. But, so here we are. So one of my reactions in terms of looking at that, I've read the agreement with the convention center, and I'm not blaming anybody here in the room. I know how sometimes you can have the best of intentions and you just maybe just don't have the business practices aren't exactly what they're supposed to be. And I'm not saying that anybody had any bad intent, and I think people have worked very hard. But from my experience in business and what I did in my career, it would be like unheard of almost to have a contract that had not been modified that long. I mean, I've seen lots of different types of long-term agreements, whether they be source code licensing or other kinds of sales arrangements or whatever. And either of those agreements are reviewed almost annually to decide how they should be modified, or even when you had a amicable relationship, the parties decide we need to start over. And I think if we terminate this agreement and with a window, it's not to say that we're terminating all the business relationship. It's that we need a new contract vehicle. That one is so out of date, and when I read it, to me, that was inadequate. That was an inadequate agreement when it was signed in 1984 or whatever. Like I said, I would have never been allowed to enter into an agreement like that in my career. So I'm just saying that I feel that we need to look at we're going to start clean, but that doesn't mean that there's not the potential. I mean, there's a lot of very experienced and dedicated people. That doesn't mean that we're wiping everybody out. We're starting clean and working together to make sure that we have the right, I'm looking at this as a business here, but it is a business that is a public asset. And so when comments were made about this is a private business and I can do this or that, to some degree that's true, but you are operating in a publicly owned asset. So that makes a difference. So we've got to reset a lot of expectations about, everyone throws around the phrase public-private partnership, and it looks like the city manager would like to say something.
Well, I think I don't want to be misunderstood, because this is not about bashing. This is about getting it right. And it is also unheard of to have to train the person that you have or the entity that you have under contract to pay them to provide professional services. And so I hope I wasn't misunderstood in that we have a lot of in-house work to do. And, I mentioned when we found out the access to the general checking account. And those were corrective actions that we had to take place. I've got to focus with requested resources on cleaning us up in-house and training ourselves. And I think that with respect to the capacity and with respect to our limited resources in-house, as a decision, do you want to make, do you want us to be in the business of training the contractors to manage well and appropriately the public funds and resources, while we ourselves have to conduct our own internal training, which is desperately needed? Or do we look at other business models and do a competitive process to see what other professional structures can exist so that we can move forward with this? I have to say that my 90 days, I made my observations. I've been couching this as a case study, but I am worried that there are other places in the organization where we will have similar findings, and I need to really be able to dedicate those resources rather than training a contractor on how to manage public assets. It's how you want to use our funds. It's how you want to create or mitigate high-risk environments, and that's really what we're having to deal with today.
Okay. Thank you. Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. And, you know, I didn't say this before, but I do have to say thank you, you know, for all your hard work. And I'm so glad that the council took the action to have this audit performed, because it has brought to light so much information that we would have not have known otherwise. And I think that's really important. I have a question on the net loss of revenue and city subsidies. I mean, there was a TID $27,000 in bonus payments that was mentioned earlier on, but now I'm seeing this bonus payments to convention center staff of $300,000 and paid over 4 fiscal years. Do we have documentation as to how that was done? You do. Is this something that can be shared tonight, or shall we leave it until October 9th?
We can provide the responses as part of our October 9th.
Great. Okay. Okay. Because I think that's very important also. I mean, and then the total lost revenue and city subsidies of $37 million. I know I mentioned this back in May when we were talking about whether or not we wanted to continue the agreement, and you know, at the time the city was putting together the budget for, you know, the fiscal budget, and you know, knowing the shortfall that you were looking at and how to cover it, and then looking down the road, you know, where we have a fiscal deficit looking at us, you know, in the face for, you know, the next 10 years. I mean, $37 million will cover a lot of that deficit. And so that bothers me, because I know how we're struggling, you know, to come up with ways to, you know, provide tax opportunities to cover some of these areas that we're trying to bring up to speed in our city. But, you know, what really bothers me is just in all of this, you know, you know, the chamber was doing their thing, the convention center was doing one thing, the CVB was doing another thing. But all in all, the bottom line is that there were no contracts. That's what I'm hearing. There were no contracts put in place or approved by the council. And as the building being a, you know, a public asset, it's a municipal building, we still have oversight over it, and there was no proper oversight. And so I have a problem with that. And even the fact that it went on for 10 years. I can't imagine that the chamber made up with a lot of business people allowed this to continue for 10 years. And nobody ever caught it. I mean, yes, there is fault on both sides, but at the same time, you know, it's an agreement. There are two parties in an agreement, and you work together. And so you can't say that just because one side was doing it, oh, we shouldn't be doing it. No, it's an agreement. People are supposed to be working together. If one side isn't doing their job, then the other side should be looking into it. So it seems like things were just let go as a result, and frankly, I feel like the city's been taken advantage of. As for the, I brought up earlier about the postal business and the RFP. Frankly, it's not transparent. As Councilmember O'Neill just said, I agree wholeheartedly. It's not a transparent deal. It's a private business within a public building, and it should be disclosed. And you can't just turn over a business. I mean, I'm thinking of like Sarah's Cafe over in the library. She has a business within a private business within a public building, but I mean, they work together. And so it's the same principle. You have a private business within a public building, there should be disclosure, there should be transparency. But, in the end, to me, the city funds, these are taxpayer monies that are being misused, and it's been allowed to continue. And I think this is an opportunity. Again, I agree with Councilmember O'Neill. This is a contract that was initiated back in 1984. It's out of date. It needs to be updated. I think there needs to be a clean slate. We need to start all over again. And like you said, anybody that wants to bid on this, they have the opportunity to provide, to submit an RFP. If the chamber wants to submit an RFP, they're more than entitled to. But I wholeheartedly agree that this is an opportunity to clean slate, clean house, and get this business, on track. I think it can be a very successful business, and there's a lot of opportunity there, but we need to get it done right, and this is a good opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kolstad.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the work plan presented by the city manager, starting on slide 23 of the PowerPoint, going to slide 27, which I believe encompasses all of the recommendations that the manager wants to proceed with. And they're down here in chronological order, including adding staff, et cetera. If I missed something, I'd certainly be willing to amend this motion, but I think that gets at everything the manager wanted to accomplish going forward. So that's my motion.
So there's a motion. Is there a second on that? Motion second. Councilmember Mahan,
I did have two questions. I was glad to see in the previous slide that there's no policy to sell the convention center, but it raised a question in my mind, which I forgot to ask earlier. Do we own the convention center at this point?
Maybe the successor agency.
We absolutely own the convention center. We have the absolute right to purchase the convention center. In fact, we have the obligation to purchase the convention center.
Has that been completed?
No.
So who owns the convention center?
Well, at this point, the successor agency still owns the land underneath, but we're obligated by the settlement agreement to purchase it. Excuse me?
What's their role in this as the owner?
They own the land underneath it. If the city built it, I guess.
Okay.
So I think the city owns the actual building, and I'd rather not discuss the relationship between the city and the successor agency at this point in a public meeting.
And my other question is, you had two different actions here tonight. You had separated them. Was there a reason that they were separated? Does the action D to add positions and the funding that goes along with it, is that a out of budget item? Does it require 5 votes for the expenditures?
There are two separate actions. The first is related to the management agreement. There is a post-agenda item in your packet of a draft letter. And then the second is the addition of positions as well as contract authority and an amendment of existing contracts. I don't have the charter in front of me, but this does not meet the criteria for needing the 5 votes.
We have we have these monies budgeted?
They would draw from the convention center fund.
I see.
which, as you just heard, had a report out of $2.2 million. Brian doesn't have this
right.
under the charter. He's pulling it up.
Are there any other questions? Are we determining whether this needs 5 votes for that one item? Okay.
At any meeting after the adoption of the budget, the City Council may amend or supplement the budget by motion adopted by the affirmative votes of at least 5 members so as to authorize the transfer of unused balances appropriated for one purpose to another purpose or to appropriate available revenue not included in the budget.
So does that mean we need 5 votes or 4 votes? That's all I'm asking.
Well, this is keeping within the purpose. There is, and from our analysis, we do not think it needs the 5 votes because there is already a appropriated amount. It's been adopted in the budget. You've just seen some results. You're not transferring a use to another purpose, which is the first trigger, and that's not happening here. It's within the convention center fund, or you are not appropriating. Available revenue that's not already included in the budget. So this is just drawing from the convention center funds, just like we paid for the JLL consultant, which shows on the matrix.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else, Councilmember Mahan?
Oh, that was yours.
All right, I'm going to support the motion. I would ask staff to, because I think before we rush out on an RFP, that we select the business model that we want to RFP out, that we spend time discussing that part. I know we started the discussion a few months back, but that we continue that discussion on the type of business model we want to put out there before we RFP, understanding that there'd be 6 months left on the contract anyway. City Attorney, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the 6 months, having been through an RFP to do a management of the convention center. So in terms of the 180 days, I think it'd be wise for the council to authorize the city manager to extend that time if necessary.
Would that be part of the motion, Councilmember Colston?
To keep the convention center going.
Would that be part of the motion, that if necessary,
that.
extension? Okay. Is that all right with the second?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. So, all right. So with that, we have a motion that was amended and added. Do you have that, City Clerk, Assistant City Clerk? Okay, thank you. A motion and second. No other discussion? Please register your vote. And that passes on 4 to 1. 4 yes, 1 no. All right, next item we have on the agenda is
Karen, number D, I think.
reports of members and special committees.
Ooh.
Anybody have a report? Seeing none, I just wanted to point out that this evening, our Chief Operating Officer, Walter Rossman, it's his birthday today. And I can't think of any other place he'd rather be than Santa Clara City Council meeting on his birthday. Thank you so much, Walter, and happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. All right, seeing no other from the council, we have City Manager direct
I have
reports.
a couple, if you'll just bear with me. I want to report that yesterday the city received the rent true-up payment from the 49ers. We received $3.34 million, of which part of it was a scheduled payment as well as the true-up payment. I also mentioned last week that on September 22nd, we have our grand reopening of the Mission Library. So that will be taking place from 10 to 1 o'clock on September 22nd. Some new announcements with respect to dates. Hold December 6th. We sent out letters to candidates today, and I shared those letters with the council, that for December 6th, we'll be providing newly elected officials orientation. It's a full day, 8:30 to 5, and we're preparing on briefing the successful candidates on issues relative to the 6 to 12-month horizon that they'll quickly need to get up to speed on. And then in addition to that, on December 13th, we were able to assemble a very highly qualified panel in public administration that will come and talk with us about governance and transitioning from a citywide elected model to a council district model. We're already starting to do the staff work in-house. I'm going to have a management training in late October, but I want for us to have a conversation about what that means from a governance standpoint. And we have a very impressive panel that will be coming, and that will be a public dialogue on December 13th from 8 to 4 o'clock. And the last is, I'm happy to report that after a couple months of processing an application and scopes of work, we have been selected by NYU from their New York University Tisch Center of Global Sports to have them study and work with us as consultants for free on 2 areas that are important to our management and oversight of of our stadium and working with our professional sports teams. The first is community engagement related to the Levi Stadium, and the second is a financial analysis of large events at Levi Stadium. And so I'm excited. They started this week, and we hope to bring you a report and an update sometime in the December timeframe. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
No, I think that's really exciting, and congratulations on receiving that. I mean, being from New York and working in New York City for 10 years, Tisch Spear was a very well-known developer and built wonderful buildings in New York. So they have Tisch has a very great name back in New York City. So that's very exciting. So that's good. It'll be good to have them here.
Thank you. That was a result of our attending the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Washington, and there's a whole group of mayors and committees that have sports stadiums and coliseums and fields and things, professional sports, and they offered that, so it was well worth going just to receive that. So yeah, great. Thank you, City Manager. All right, next, okay, we're here for our adjournment, and I have one gentleman that I'm going to ask the council that we adjourn in his memory. If we could please adjourn this council meeting in the memory of Warren Johnson, a longtime Santa Clara High School physical education teacher and coach. Warren Johnson, a longtime physical education teacher and coach, was a beloved and respected member of the Santa Clara High School community. He was a valued member of the Santa Clara Unified School District community for 20 years. His impact was felt throughout the district, which had been home to his daughters. Warren, who played football and graduated from Cupertino High School in 1984, had been a fixture for the Santa Clara High School Bruins for over 2 decades, and yet still continued to impact his alma mater at the same time. From students to teachers to administrators to community members, Warren positively impacted the lives of many throughout the decades. He is described as a true friend, great family man, and the kindest of all human beings to all who were fortunate enough to know him. Warren is survived by his wife, Lori, and their 2 daughters. So if we could please adjourn in his memory. Is there a motion? So move. A motion second. Please register your vote. And I believe that passes unanimously. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming.